Li Xuyang introduces another survivor to Zhao Tianlei and asks whether the newcomer can travel with them. Zhao Tianlei studies the man while Li Xuyang waits for his answer. The newcomer immediately tries to win Brother Lei over by acting friendly and useful. He says meeting like this must be fate, then suggests everyone discuss where they should go next. Li Xuyang quickly loses patience when the guy starts talking like he already belongs to the group. Another survivor begs them not to leave him behind and promises he will do anything useful. Tianlei makes his rule clear: anyone who follows must prove they are worth keeping around. The nervous man insists he has survived on his own before and can still contribute. His attitude changes the second he sees the women, and he immediately starts acting far too familiar. He even tries flattering one of them, earning an instant look of disgust. The woman knocks his hands away and makes it painfully clear she is not interested. When he keeps pushing, she shuts him down so hard the rest of the group can only watch. The embarrassed survivor finally realizes that joining this team does not mean he can do whatever he wants. Attention shifts to the silver-haired woman as everyone starts discussing the group's destination. Tianlei wipes his face and listens, still unsure what direction makes the most sense. The silver-haired woman leans close and reminds him that she intends to stay beside him wherever he goes. Li Xuyang's reaction says everything as the sudden intimacy catches him completely off guard. Even Tianlei freezes for a moment because she says it with absolutely no hesitation. She calmly confirms that she plans to follow him, making her position in the group unmistakable. Tianlei accepts her choice, but warns that the road ahead will be dangerous for everyone. A pink-haired girl watches the exchange and jokingly threatens anyone who causes trouble for Sister Bingyan. The silver-haired woman gets another enthusiastic vote of support from the younger survivors. Li Xuyang complains that the group dynamic has become much more complicated than he expected. The conversation finally returns to business as they compare possible places to seek shelter. One woman angrily argues that her family connections make the capital the obvious destination. Tianlei lets her finish before asking how she expects them to cross such a massive distance alive. She explains that her father holds an important government position and could arrange protection if they reach him. Li Xuyang points out that promises from the old world mean very little when every road is full of zombies. Tianlei questions whether the privilege of reaching the capital is really worth gambling everyone's lives. The others quietly consider the distance and the nearly impossible transportation problem. Tianlei says he is not interested in chasing a distant promise when they already have a safer option nearby. Li Xuyang agrees and says he will follow Brother Lei instead of heading toward the capital. The woman still pushes the idea, insisting her father's position could secure them once they arrive. Tianlei reminds her that trains, buses, and airports are no longer reliable enough to build a plan around. Even her companion admits that contacting her father first would be smarter than dragging everyone across the country. Tianlei brings up the known survivor base in Yuzhou, which is far closer and actually reachable on foot. Another survivor hesitates, still wondering whether the capital might offer better long-term protection. The practical answer is to reach safety first, then use any working communication system to contact family later. Li Xuyang gets annoyed when the argument circles back toward the same impossible capital plan. The pink-haired girl lightens the mood by teasing the couple about how worried they are for each other. She keeps poking at them until even the stubborn pair start looking embarrassed. The woman finally agrees that reaching the Yuzhou base first is the only sensible move. Her companion accepts the decision too, promising they can search for her family once everyone is safe. With the destination settled, Tianlei turns the discussion toward the people who still want to follow them. He warns the new survivors that this is not an escort service and nobody can expect constant rescue. The nervous newcomers accept the condition because staying behind would be even more dangerous. Tianlei ends the meeting with one final rule: anyone who joins must take responsibility for staying alive. Before leaving, Tianlei's group gathers whatever food they can carry and prepares one last meal. The women check the remaining supplies while everyone tries to eat enough for the road ahead. A steaming pot gives the exhausted survivors their first decent meal in a while. One picky newcomer complains about the food, immediately annoying the people who actually prepared it. Li Xuyang looks at him like he cannot believe someone is whining during the apocalypse. The others remind the complainer that nobody is obligated to feed a useless passenger. Tianlei makes it clear that from now on, every person must find a way to support themselves. Even the simple dumplings suddenly look much better when the alternative is going hungry. The argument pulls everyone's attention toward the kitchen just as another problem appears. A zombie is discovered among the cooking area, turning the meal into instant chaos. Someone panics and nearly bolts before Tianlei can explain that the creature is already dead. The frightened survivor needs another second to accept that the corpse cannot actually hurt anyone. Tianlei tells them to stop wasting energy on fear and finish eating while they still have time. The group settles back down, though nobody is enjoying the atmosphere anymore. Once the meal is finished, Tianlei orders everyone to pack up because they are leaving immediately. The survivors move to the building with their bags and weapons ready. Tianlei checks the route ahead, while Li Zhuyang stays close enough to respond if anything jumps them. Outside, the abandoned road confirms just how badly the city has collapsed. The men study the street and start planning how to move the larger group without drawing attention. A burst of shouting behind them proves that keeping everyone quiet may be the hardest part. One survivor begins another argument over who should carry what, slowing the whole group down. The tension spreads as people complain about being assigned heavier supplies. Tianlei refuses to let personal grudges derail the evacuation and orders everyone to cooperate. The silver-haired woman calmly backs him up, shutting down another complaint before it grows. A frightened survivor still tries to bargain for an easier role, claiming he is not strong enough. Tianlei reminds him that zombies will not care whether he feels ready. Li Zhuyang gets physical when the man keeps making excuses instead of moving. The survivor backs off, finally understanding that the group has no patience left for freeloading. Another man quietly checks on the women and makes sure nobody was hurt during the argument. The group reaches the street and finds the road blocked badly enough that their vehicle cannot continue. Everyone stares at the obstruction, realizing they will have to abandon the convenience of riding. Tianlei orders the supplies redistributed because every person will now be carrying something on foot. One newcomer immediately asks what happens if zombies find them while they are walking. Tianlei answers that anyone too scared to move is free to stay behind. The blunt choice silences the complaints because nobody actually wants to remain in the ruined city. Li Zhuyang shoulders his load and tells everyone to stop talking and start walking. The reluctant survivors finally fall into line behind the stronger members of the group. Tianlei takes point while Wu Xuan watches the rear and the others stay packed together. They cross the open road carefully, keeping their voices low and their steps controlled. A row of shops ahead is filled with wandering zombies, forcing the group to slow down. Tianlei signals everyone to stay quiet because a single scream could bring the entire street down on them. The survivors creep past the storefronts one by one, barely daring to breathe. For now, the zombies do not notice them, and the group keeps moving toward the survivor base. The group continues through the city on foot, staying close together between abandoned buildings. Tianlei repeatedly checks the corners while the weaker survivors struggle to match his pace. The long walk quickly drains everyone who is used to relying on the truck. One of the newcomers starts fidgeting so badly that the others finally ask what is wrong. He admits he desperately needs a bathroom, choosing the worst possible time for a biological emergency. The confession earns a wave of disbelief, but Tianlei still finds a place where he can step away. Everyone waits in tense silence while the man disappears behind cover. The delay makes the group vulnerable, so Wu Xuan keeps his weapon trained on the surrounding street. A faint sound nearby instantly puts Tianlei on alert. He raises a hand and orders everyone to freeze where they are. The survivors hold their breath as movement starts coming from the shadows. Tianlei warns them not to make a single sound until he knows what is nearby. The nervous man tries to hurry back without drawing attention. Someone accidentally makes noise and the nearby zombies immediately turn toward them. Tianlei's expression changes the moment he realizes stealth is no longer an option. The guilty survivor apologizes, but there is no time left for apologies. Tianlei orders everyone to run before the small group of zombies becomes a horde. The survivors sprint down the street with the undead closing in behind them. Wu Xuan stays near the rear, ready to shoot anything that gets too close. Tianlei keeps the slower members moving while searching for a defensible route. More zombies pour out from side streets, forcing the group to change direction again. Wu Xuan fires controlled shots rather than wasting ammunition on every target. The improvised suppressor keeps the gunfire from attracting even more undead. Tianlei notices the modified weapon and realizes Wu Xuan has been improving his equipment on the move. A survivor asks whether the strange attachment is really a silencer. Wu Xuan explains that he built it from metal tubing because ordinary gunfire would be suicidal here. Tianlei jokes that someone with weapon modification skills is exactly the kind of survivor worth keeping. Wu Xuan takes the compliment seriously, already thinking about what he could build with proper tools. The brief conversation ends when another wave of undead appears ahead. Tianlei immediately recognizes that their escape route is about to close. Someone shouts that more zombies are coming, sending the weaker survivors into panic. Tianlei spots a building entrance that can shelter them if they reach it first. The group changes direction and rushes toward the doorway. A survivor tries to push past the others, caring only about getting himself inside. Tianlei forces him aside and orders everyone through without trampling each other. During the scramble, Zhong Bingyan twists her ankle badly enough that she cannot keep running. She tries to stand on it, but the pain immediately drops her back down. Tianlei turns back instead of leaving her behind, furious that the group has been split. Another survivor complains that helping her will get everyone killed. Tianlei lifts Bingyan and tells the man to shut up unless he plans to fight in her place. The same coward who caused trouble earlier mocks Tianlei and tells him to handle the zombies himself. Now that he has access to food and a vehicle, the man openly admits he never cared about the group. He boasts that he can drive toward the capital alone and calls everyone else dead weight. The betrayal makes it clear that he only followed Tianlei until he found a chance to steal their supplies. He even threatens the people who challenged him earlier, convinced they are trapped now. Tianlei moves the injured Bingyan aside before the confrontation can cost them precious seconds. The traitor escapes while the others are forced to deal with the immediate zombie threat. Tianlei watches him go and promises himself that stealing from this group will not be forgotten. Once the immediate danger passes, Tianlei carries Bingyan into a safer room so someone can examine her ankle. She tries to hide how much it hurts, but the swelling is already getting worse. The others gather around while a medically experienced survivor checks the injury. Bingyan winces the moment pressure is applied to the side of her foot. Tianlei watches closely, worried the fall may have fractured something. The examiner carefully moves the ankle and confirms that the bone does not seem broken. That is good news, but the soft tissue is badly strained and she still needs medicine and rest. Bingyan insists she can keep moving, refusing to become a burden. Tianlei tells her stubbornness will only make the injury worse if she forces it now. She reluctantly lets the others help her sit back down. The pain continues pulsing through her ankle even after she stops putting weight on it. Tianlei starts thinking about where they can find anti-inflammatory medicine nearby. Bingyan tries to joke through the pain so he will stop looking so worried. He does not laugh because the group has already lost too many supplies to take another medical risk. The examiner repeats that it is most likely a soft tissue injury and should recover with proper treatment. Tianlei decides to search the surrounding stores for medicine immediately. Bingyan reaches for him and tells him not to take another unnecessary risk on her account. He answers that leaving an injury untreated would be the greater risk. Someone teases Bingyan about finally discovering why high heels and apocalyptic travel do not mix. She glares at the joke, though it does break the tension for a moment. Tianlei leaves the room while the others keep Bingyan off the injured foot. Not long after, her condition suddenly worsens and her face becomes noticeably flushed. Someone calls for Tianlei when they realize she is running a fever. By the time he returns, Bingyan is sweating and struggling to stay comfortable. The group explains that the fever appeared quickly and may keep climbing. Tianlei's concern turns into frustration because the stolen supplies included most of their clean water. He blames the earlier carelessness that allowed the traitor to escape with resources they desperately need now. Still, arguing will not lower Bingyan's temperature, so he focuses on finding treatment. Tianlei leads a search through nearby shelves and medicine cabinets. The survivors gather anything useful instead of looking only for one specific drug. Painkillers, anti-inflammatory medicine, disinfectants, and fever reducers all go into their bags. Tianlei says medicine is too valuable to leave behind when anyone could be injured later. The group checks expiration dates and packaging as quickly as the situation allows. They return with enough supplies to treat Bingyan and build a small medical reserve. Someone prepares the medicine while Tianlei checks her temperature again. Bingyan manages to take the tablets but immediately asks for water. The request freezes everyone because their remaining drinking supply is almost gone. Tianlei asks what water is left in the bags, and receives the answer he was dreading. Most of the canteen water had been stored together for convenience. That entire stash was in the bag stolen during the earlier betrayal. The group starts checking bottles and containers for even a few remaining mouthfuls. Bingyan weakly asks whether they found anything. Tianlei promises her he will get water even if he has to search every building nearby. The others offer to go with him, but he does not want to leave the injured group unguarded. He assigns people to protect Bingyan and the supplies while he searches outside. The stolen bag becomes more than an annoyance now because it directly threatens Bingyan's recovery. Tianlei heads out with one goal: find clean water before her fever gets any worse. The search leads Tianlei's group into a cafe, but the taps produce nothing usable. Someone checks the plumbing again and confirms the building's water supply has already failed. Back with the others, Bingyan's fever makes every wasted minute feel more dangerous. The survivors spread out through the cafe to look for sealed drinks or stored water. Wu Xuan stays near the entrance while the others search the back rooms. When someone asks where Brother Lei went, Wu Xuan says Tianlei is still outside searching. The lack of water starts another round of nervous complaints from the weaker survivors. Wu Xuan tells them panic will not help Bingyan and orders everyone to keep searching. They confirm again that the stolen bag contained nearly all of the group's clean water. Bingyan tries to reassure the others even though her condition is clearly getting worse. Wu Xuan refuses to abandon his post because Tianlei specifically trusted him to guard the room. Li Suyang argues that relying on Brother Lei for every problem will eventually get someone killed. The statement sounds harsh, but the group knows he is right. Tianlei may be the leader, yet one person cannot fight, search, guard, and rescue everyone forever. Li Suyang says the growing group needs clear roles so everyone knows what they are responsible for. The survivors begin discussing who should serve as backup leadership when Tianlei is away. Someone points out that Li Suyang has been beside Tianlei longest and already acts like his deputy. Li Shuyong does not love the pressure, but he accepts that somebody needs to make decisions. Wu Xuan supports the idea and says he will handle security while Shuyong manages the others. With the argument settled, they organize another search for drinking water instead of waiting helplessly. Elsewhere, Tianlei continues moving alone through the deserted building. Without the others watching, he finally has a moment to check the mysterious system inside his mind. The system confirms that killing evolved zombies has increased his access to stronger rewards. Tianlei reviews the crystal nuclei he has collected and wonders what they can actually unlock. He learns that higher-ranked cores can be exchanged for abilities, upgrades, and special materials. A newly unlocked exchange option immediately catches his attention. Tianlei studies the list, already calculating which rewards would help the group survive the most. He complains that the system's prices are still ridiculous despite how hard the cores are to obtain. The system offers no sympathy, leaving him to decide whether spending the crystals is worth it. Tianlei closes the menu and realizes he still does not feel dramatically different after his latest gains. That makes him suspicious enough to test his strength instead of trusting numbers on a screen. He finds a thick pane of security glass and decides it will make a perfect target. The others would call the test reckless, but Tianlei wants a real measure of his current power. He braces himself and drives a punch straight into the reinforced surface. Cracks spread instantly through glass designed to resist heavy impact. Tianlei stares at the damage, genuinely surprised by how much stronger he has become. A second hit smashes through the anti-theft glass completely. The result finally proves that the system's upgrades are not just numbers in his head. Tianlei flexes his hand and realizes ordinary barriers will no longer slow him down for long. That new confidence matters because the city keeps producing enemies stronger than normal zombies. With his strength confirmed, he returns to the real problem and resumes searching for water. Tianlei chases the stolen red sports car through the empty street, refusing to let the thief disappear easily. He hurls a weapon toward the fleeing vehicle, but the driver swerves away at the last second. The spinning weapon slams into the road beside the car as it speeds past. Tianlei can only watch catches his attention and gives him an idea for finding water. Yu Yang slips inside and immediately notices several large containers used for storing seafood. He opens one and celebrates when he finds it filled with clear water. One taste ruins the excitement because the water is unbearably salty. Su Yang remembers that fish tanks use salt water just as a stranger creeps up behind him with a bat. The sudden attack nearly catches him completely off guard. He twists away from the bat in time, turning a surprise blow into a narrow miss. The attacker is not alone, and an older woman rushes forward to stop the confrontation from becoming deadly. Several frightened survivors crowd around while two men try to control Zhu Yang and his weapon. They eventually overpower him with numbers and tie him up before he can explain himself. The family stares at their prisoner nervously, still unsure whether he is a bandit or something worse. Xu Yang angrily demands to know who they are and why they attacked him without warning. The older woman tries to calm him, explaining that everyone inside has been terrified of strangers. Still tied up, Xu Yang listens but makes it clear he is not impressed by their excuse. The older man admits they believed anyone entering the building might be coming to rob or kill them. The woman apologizes and says fear has made the whole family jump at every sound. Zhu Yang points out that being scared does not justify cracking somebody's skull before asking a question. One of the younger men gets defensive and argues that they were only protecting their family. The argument heats up again when Xu Yang mocks how badly their ambush actually worked. Another survivor raises the bat, but the older adults quickly stop him from starting a second fight. Xu Yang watches their nervous faces and decides they are desperate civilians rather than organized killers. When someone reaches for his sword, Xu Yang warns them not to touch equipment they do not understand. A younger man ignores the warning and tries handling the weapon anyway. The awkward struggle nearly sends him crashing to the floor, while Xu Yang watches in disbelief. Another clumsy attempt lands a blow close enough to make Xu Yang's patience disappear completely. The ropes jerk tight around his chest as he decides he has listened to enough nonsense. Xu Yang strains against the bindings and starts working his arms free. He warns the family that they should have untied him while he was still willing to be polite. One survivor realizes too late that the ropes are not strong enough to hold him. The whole family backs away as Xu Yang rises and the last knots start giving out. He grabs his sword again with a grin that immediately makes everyone regret the ambush. Xu Yang slams a foot down and snaps the remaining restraints apart. Free at last, he rolls his shoulders and asks which attacker wants to try him first. The family immediately apologizes once they realize Xu Yang could have hurt them at any time. Xu Yang lowers his weapon but keeps enough distance to make another ambush impossible. The older woman begs him not to misunderstand, saying fear has controlled them since the outbreak. The older man admits they have barely left the building because zombies still surround the neighborhood. Xu Yang sits down and forces everyone to explain exactly how many undead are outside. The younger survivors argue over the number, proving none of them has actually checked carefully. Soo-young tells them that hiding forever is not a plan and eventually their food will run out. The family looks embarrassed when he points out how helpless they have made themselves. One younger man boasts that his absent brother could kill 100 zombies if he were here. Yu-yang laughs at the claim and says someone that strong would basically be saving the world alone. The bragging survivor doubles down until the older adults finally tell him to stop. Yu-yang's patience thins as the conversation keeps drifting away from the real problem. He asks whether they actually want to leave or would rather spend the rest of their lives hiding. The answer is obvious, but the adults are terrified that stepping outside will kill their children. Yu-yang explains that staying only delays the same danger because their supplies are already limited. The older man argues that going outside means facing the zombies immediately. Soo-young counters that leaving at least gives them a chance to reach real shelter. That word, chance, changes the mood because everyone knows they currently have none. The parents quietly look at their children and start considering the risk differently. The mother asks whether Soo-young can at least take the younger ones if the adults cannot keep up. Soo-young says he can bring everyone, but only if they answer his questions and follow instructions. The family agrees immediately, willing to do almost anything for a way out. His first question is simple: where can he find fresh water in this building? They point him toward the stored supplies and explain what containers are safe to drink from. Soo-young finally gets the water he came for and prepares to return to Tianlei's group. Before leaving, he warns the family not to make noise or open the doors until he comes back. The survivors watch him go, suddenly treating the same stranger they tied up like their best hope. When Soo-young reunites with Tianlei, he quickly explains both the water source and the trapped family. Tianlei agrees to help because extra survivors are not a problem if they are willing to contribute. The men return to the building and find the family waiting exactly where Soo-young left them. The younger survivors immediately stare at Tianlei, wondering if this is the man Soo-young follows. Tianlei checks the exits and asks a few practical questions before deciding how to move everyone. Soo-young sits nearby while the family apologizes again for attacking him earlier. He tells them to forget it as long as nobody swings another bat at his head. The warning earns a nervous laugh and finally breaks the hostility between both sides. Later, Tianlei returns to Bingyan and checks whether her fever and ankle have improved. Bingyan notices how exhausted he looks and asks whether he found the water safely. He gives her the supplies and reminds her that getting better is currently her only job. The two sit close enough for their usual teasing to turn awkwardly intimate. Bingyan asks about the new survivors and whether Soo-young caused any trouble on his own. Tianlei says Soo-young somehow got tied up by civilians, which is almost impressive in its own way. Bingyan laughs, then asks Tianlei whether he has been worrying about her this whole time. He avoids giving her the direct answer she wants, which only makes her more certain. Tianlei changes the subject by placing a new pair of shoes in front of her. He explains that proper sneakers will be much safer than the heels she was wearing before. Bingyan looks at the gift and realizes he remembered exactly why her ankle was injured. She slips off the old shoes and reaches for the practical pair he brought back. Her expression softens because the simple gift says more than Tianlei is willing to admit. Tianlei tells her to recover quickly, and Bingyan promises she will be ready when the group moves again. By morning, Soo-young returns with the family and introduces them properly to Tianlei's group. The older survivors are relieved to see an organized team instead of another gang of raiders. Soo-young explains that the family stayed hidden in Seafood City and has almost no combat experience. Tianlei listens without judging them because surviving this long still proves they did something right. The older man asks whether Soo-young was telling the truth about a nearby survivor base. Tianlei confirms base number 6 is their destination and says the family may follow under the same rules as everyone else. The parents immediately agree because their children need a safer future than this building can provide. One of the younger men gets excited and starts asking how many zombies Tianlei has killed. Yu-yang casually exaggerates Brother Lei's strength, making his story sound almost impossible. The family's two younger boys stare at Tianlei like he has suddenly become an action hero. Their father introduces the household and explains that protecting the children is his biggest concern. Tianlei acknowledges the introductions but says names matter less than what everyone can contribute. The older adults promise they will work, rather than become permanent burdens on the team. The boys immediately ask whether the stories about Tianlei killing huge groups of zombies are real. Tianlei refuses to brag, but Soo-young's face basically answers the question for him. The sight of bread distracts the kids for about 3 seconds before another argument starts. One of them insults the stored seafood, earning an instant scolding from his parents. The other joins in and turns breakfast into a full family comedy routine. Their father threatens punishment if they keep embarrassing him in front of the new group. One boy dramatically complains that his own dad is trying to kill him. The mother apologizes for the children's behavior while everyone else tries not to laugh. Tianlei says the family can stay, but the children also need to learn discipline quickly. The adults agree because noise and careless behavior can get the entire team surrounded. Tianlei then asks what useful skills the new survivors actually have. The family explains who can cook, drive, repair things, or handle basic tools. Tianli compares those skills with his existing members, so every person can have a defined role. He names Wu Xuan as the strongest marksman and Binyan as one of the group's most capable planners. The older man reveals that he has years of driving experience, immediately giving the team something valuable. Tianli says long-distance driving will drain whoever handles it, so having another driver helps everyone. The family finally understands that contribution, not fighting ability alone, determines their place here. Tianli warns the two boys that being young does not mean they can ignore orders during an emergency. The kids reluctantly promise to listen, though their faces say that promise will be tested. With the new members accepted, everyone gathers around a map to discuss the route toward base number 6. One path is shorter but crosses denser parts of the city, where zombie numbers could be much higher. Another route is longer and more complicated, but it avoids several known danger zones. Tianli asks for opinions instead of making the decision alone. One survivor prefers the shorter route because the team has already proven it can fight. The older family members support the safer route because they cannot match the fighter's speed. Tianli chooses the longer route, deciding extra time is better than unnecessary casualties. The others accept the decision and start planning when they can move. Bingyan's injured ankle becomes the final limitation because Tianli refuses to force her to travel too soon. They agree to wait until she can walk more comfortably before leaving. Attention turns to transportation in the car stolen earlier by the traitorous survivor. Someone mentions recovering another usable vehicle once they are back on the road. The older driver says he can handle almost anything that still starts. Tianli estimates the current seating and confirms they can squeeze several more people into the convoy. With roles, route, and transportation decided, the expanded group finally has a workable plan. Before departure, Tianli checks Bingyan's ankle and asks whether the medicine has reduced the swelling. She tests her weight carefully and admits the pain is much better than before. The group uses the extra time to rest, reorganize supplies, and prepare for the road. The two younger boys immediately find old entertainment equipment and treat the shelter like a vacation home. Their father catches them playing with wine and nearly loses his mind. He reminds them that people are dying outside and this is not a place to mess around. The boys quiet down after another warning from their parents. Soon the convoy is moving again with the new family packed into the available vehicles. Tianli studies the road ahead while the driver follows the route they chose earlier. Someone notices they are no longer heading directly toward base number 6 and asks what changed. Tianli says they are making one stop first because the team needs better weapons. The destination comes into view, a police station that may still contain firearms and ammunition. The others immediately understand why Tianli was willing to take the detour. Several survivors worry that police buildings would have attracted a huge number of zombies during the collapse. Tianli confirms there are undead around the station, but he still wants the weapons inside. Someone asks how they are supposed to enter without getting surrounded. Tianli says he will pull the zombies away while the others wait for an opening. The group thinks the plan sounds insane because dozens of undead are gathered nearby. Tianli turns to Zuyang and challenges him to help make some noise. Xuyang accepts while the others promise to hold position and protect Bingyan. The two men move into the street and prepare to draw every zombie away from the entrance. Tianli triggers a loud distraction that immediately turns heads across the area. The first zombies begin shambling toward the sound. He keeps moving and shouting until the entire cluster starts following him. Tianli runs just fast enough to keep the undead interested without letting them catch him. More zombies join the chase as he leads the crowd farther from the station. The survivors watching from cover realize the plan is actually working. Soon the front entrance is almost completely clear. Someone mutters that Tianli has to be crazy to use himself as bait like this. A companion immediately shuts down anyone who talks as though Brother Lei is already dead. With the route open, the remaining team has to decide who actually enters the police station. Wu Xuan volunteers first because firearms are his specialty. Another capable fighter joins him while the weaker survivors stay outside. The family wants to help, but Tianli's people warn that inexperienced civilians would only slow the search. The older father insists he can still contribute instead of hiding behind everyone else. After a short argument, they agree to let one additional adult accompany the search team. The group enters carefully and calls out to see whether any police officers are still alive. No answer comes from the halls and the building looks disturbingly clean for an abandoned station. They move deeper inside without lowering their weapons. The family members stay close together while Wu Xuan checks each doorway. The new family insists they can still help and asks Tianli's people not to look down on them. The search party calls into the station again, checking whether anyone is hiding deeper inside. Only silence answers them as they move through a disturbingly quiet corridor. Zuyang notes that the place is still clean and orderly, making the emptiness feel even stranger. One survivor pauses at a doorway, sensing that the most useful room may finally be ahead. They find the firearms storage room and realize the dangerous detour has paid off. The younger survivors rush toward the racks, amazed that the guns are real and still usable. One of them excitedly grabs a rifle and treats the armory like the coolest thing he has ever seen. Before anyone can celebrate, a voice orders every person in the room to stop moving. Uniformed armed men surround them and warn that the slightest resistance will be answered with bullets. Chu Young raises his hands and quickly explains that they are survivors seeking help, not attackers. The armed men order everyone to stay still while they check for bites and signs of infection. The group cooperates because arguing with loaded rifles would be a terrible idea. The older woman is embarrassed by the inspection and complains that nobody needs to search her that closely. One of the boys finds the entire situation exciting until his mother pulls him back into line. Wuxuan reluctantly hands over his improvised firearm when the officers warn that the modification could be dangerous. Once both sides calm down, the survivors ask who these armed men are and why they stayed here. They explain that Tianlei's group came from Yuzhou Business School and is heading toward base number 6. Chu Young recounts how they reached the station after luring the zombies away from the entrance. The officer asks whether the vehicles parked outside belong to their group. Chu Young confirms they do and says more companions are still waiting nearby. The senior officer finally lowers his weapon and apologizes for treating them like criminals. Tianlei's people ask whether these few men are really all that remain in the station. The officer says there used to be many more, but repeated trips outside reduced their numbers badly. The survivors notice barred cells and realize the station also contains several prisoners. The officers explain that the captives were already here when society collapsed. Some teammates argue that keeping dangerous criminals alive is wasting food and creating another threat. The police refuse to execute prisoners just because the world outside has fallen apart. Their leader says wearing the uniform still means something, even if the government is barely functioning. He refuses to abandon people in locked cells where zombies would eventually eat them alive. The group suggests taking everyone toward base number 6 if transportation can be arranged. The officers appreciate the offer and admit that armed allies would make evacuation far more realistic. Before leaving, they still need to collect important police records and remaining equipment. Everyone agrees to eat and rest briefly while the officers finish packing. The survivors are starving after spending the entire morning moving and fighting. Someone reminds them not to relax too much because the zombies Tianlei, lured away, can still return. The officers split up to gather supplies while the newcomers remain under watch. Wuxuan continues talking with one officer about firearms and weapon maintenance. The officer sees potential in his improvised setup and offers to show him something safer. Wuxuan insists his current gun works, but even he knows the homemade suppressor has limitations. The officer points out that a proper weapon will be more reliable when his life depends on it. He opens the armory and starts selecting equipment suited to Wu Xuan's skills. Wu Xuan hesitates because he does not want to waste scarce police weapons. His companions tell him that surviving with better equipment is exactly what the guns are for now. He finally accepts the upgrade and starts checking the weapon's condition. Elsewhere, the station begins settling into an uneasy temporary peace. The prisoners watch the newcomers and vehicles outside with much more interest than they should. One captive quietly asks whether the officers really plan to take everyone with them. Another prisoner starts calculating how easy it might be to steal the vehicles once the cells open. The criminals whisper among themselves while pretending to cooperate. One of the officers passes the cell block without realizing how quickly the mood has changed. The prisoners wait until attention shifts elsewhere before moving on their plan. A sudden commotion erupts from the detention area and forces everyone to turn. An armed prisoner appears and orders people to stay where they are. The prisoners now control the cell block, and the civilians finally understand why they have been locked inside. One thug shoves an older survivor aside when she demands to know what is happening. A younger man jumps forward to defend his mother even though the criminals are armed. The prisoners answer with violence, forcing the family back before anyone can organize resistance. One captive is knocked to the floor, while the gang takes full control of the corridor. The survivors watch helplessly as the criminals collect keys, weapons, and anything else they can use. A gang member laughs because Chief Ma and the remaining officers can no longer stop them. Another thug orders the door open so they can reach the vehicles parked outside. They celebrate the chance to escape in a luxury car loaded with supplies. The gang moves quickly, knowing every minute inside the station increases the chance of being trapped again. From behind the bars, the civilians realize these men were prisoners from the beginning, not police officers. That explains the uniforms, the threats, and why nobody cared about following police procedure. The frightened family asks how criminals managed to overpower the actual officers so suddenly. Nobody has time to explain because the gang is already preparing to leave. Outside, the prisoners spot the parked vehicles and immediately start dividing the loot between themselves. The sight of an expensive car convinces them that the newcomers must be carrying even more supplies. One thug is far more interested in the women than the food, revealing exactly what kind of people they are dealing with. Their leader asks why they should keep the other prisoners alive once they have transportation. Another criminal argues that extra people can still serve as labor or cannon fodder when supplies run low. The gang decides there is no reason to rush toward base number 6, where soldiers and rules would control them again. One man mocks the idea of a government-run base and says the lawless world outside suits them much better. They openly admit that chaos gives people like them more freedom than civilization ever did. For now they only need weapons, food, and enough bodies to keep zombies away from themselves. The gang agrees on the plan and begins moving toward the cars. Meanwhile, Tianlei is still far from the station and has no idea how badly the situation has changed. His attention is locked on a new enemy moving far faster than any ordinary zombie. The evolved creature streaks through the street and forces Tianlei to abandon normal fighting instincts. He remembers the system's warning that this monster is not an average infected. The creature's speed makes even a moment of carelessness potentially fatal. Tianlei tries to create distance while watching for a pattern in its movements. A heavy impact leaves him hurting badly enough to suspect internal damage. He forces himself upright and relies on every bit of combat experience he has gained so far. Elsewhere, an injured survivor begs the others to save the two children even if the adults cannot make it. The children's mother refuses to talk like they are already dead and promises they will leave together. The family clings to that hope while the station remains under criminal control. Back outside, the system finally identifies Tianlei's opponent as a licker. It explains that the licker is a secondary evolved zombie with strength far beyond ordinary infected. The creature cannot see, but its hearing is sharp enough to locate even the smallest sound. Its claws let it cling to walls and ceilings, turning the entire environment into an attack surface. The barbed tongue gives it another weapon capable of striking from surprising distance. Even severe injuries may not stop it immediately because the evolved body can recover from damage quickly. Tianlei demands to know whether the system has any useful weakness instead of just describing how terrifying it is. The system coldly reminds him that surviving the fight is still his responsibility. Tianlei curses the useless explanation and wishes he could give the system a terrible review. The licker attacks again before he can complain any further. Tianlei barely avoids the first rush and realizes the creature moves like a monstrous blur. Its tongue snaps toward him with enough force to tear flesh apart. He twists away, but the speed difference keeps the fight dangerously close. The licker presses its advantage and refuses to give him enough time to recover. Tianlei studies every movement because brute force alone will not beat something this fast. The next exchange begins with the licker charging straight at him again. The licker launches itself forward and Tianlei slips aside just before its claws reach him. He keeps his eyes on the monster, waiting for the tiny opening created by its own momentum. Its tongue wraps around him in a sudden strike and nearly locks his body in place. The creature yanks hard, trying to drag him directly into its claws and teeth. Tianlei fights the pole instead of panicking, bracing himself before the next attack lands. The licker looms over him with its tongue extended, confident that the human cannot escape. Tianlei remembers that despite its evolution, the creature still shares weaknesses with ordinary zombies. He attacks the vulnerable head instead of wasting strength on its tougher body. The monster recoils, giving Tianlei the first real breathing room of the fight. He realizes his legs are still fast enough to stay just outside the creature's killing range. The wounded licker hisses and prepares to rush him again. Tianlei creates distance through the street and forces the monster to chase on his terms. He decides the next clean opportunity has to end the fight before the police station is placed in more danger. Back inside the station, one of the criminals examines the keys taken from the officers. He confirms which set opens the remaining cells and detention doors. The gang starts unlocking prisoners who are willing to join them instead of the police. Within minutes, the criminal force inside the station becomes much larger and much more dangerous. A prisoner quietly works the lock until the detention door finally clicks open. The trapped civilians realize the criminals are releasing allies while keeping everyone else confined. One older survivor warns the others not to provoke them while they still have guns. The expanded gang storms through the corridors and begins searching the station for useful supplies. A survivor tries to follow, but a criminal blocks the way and forces him back. The gang leader looks pleased, because the station now belongs to him instead of the police. Someone explains that a spare vehicle key should be in the monitoring room. The criminals immediately head there, planning to steal transportation before the zombies return. Several gang members spread out through the building, while others guard the prisoners. They move together because none of them wants to be the first person caught alone. One survivor warns that there are still dangerous people locked deeper inside. The criminals ignore the warning and keep opening whatever might contain useful allies. A released man thanks them and joins the group without hesitation. The gang continues clearing rooms and collecting weapons. Then Suyang suddenly recognizes a familiar face among the prisoners. It is Li Yichuan, the same coward who betrayed the group and escaped with their supplies. Suyang asks whether the others know this man and immediately receives a tense answer. Li Yichuan looks just as shocked to see Suyang inside the station. He explains that his car ran out of fuel and he was later captured by the fake police. According to him, the criminals forced the survivors to work like servants and run dangerous errands. Li Yichuan begs Su Yang to rescue him before the gang notices what is happening. Su Yang reminds him that the world has a funny way of returning the cruelty people give others. Li Yichuan immediately apologizes and promises he has changed completely. Nobody believes a word of it because he made similar promises before abandoning everyone. His former bodyguard is confronted for leaving his employer behind when the danger became serious. The man points out that loyalty ended the moment his employer treated everyone else as disposable. He says he already repaid what he owed and refuses to die for someone who would never protect him. The argument leaves Li Yichuan isolated, with nobody willing to risk themselves for him. Zhu Yang tells him the key to survival is in his own hands now. Li Yichuan can only watch as the others prepare to leave without him. Yu Yang turns away and tells his companions to move. Li Yichuan shouts after him, furious that begging did not work. He swears revenge even while still trapped behind the bars. The group reaches an elevator and discovers the controls have been disabled from above. They cannot start it from their floor, destroying the easiest escape route. Someone suggests climbing, but the shaft would expose them for too long. They decide to wait for the criminals upstairs to come back down instead. Su Yang proposes ambushing them and taking their guns the moment they enter the corridor. If the plan works, they can regain the initiative without fighting the entire gang at once. Everyone agrees, because there is no safer route available. Meanwhile, the people outside are growing nervous that Xu Yang and the others have been gone too long. Bingyan tells them to trust Tianlei's people and avoid creating another problem by rushing in blindly. Movement near the station suddenly draws everyone's attention. A few men emerge and the waiting survivors try to determine whether they are friends or enemies. Some recognize people connected to Li Shuyang and cautiously move closer. Relief spreads when familiar survivors appear and explain that the situation inside has gone bad. The group realizes the men wearing police uniforms are actually criminals controlling the station. Someone reaches for the car door, but another survivor warns them not to open it yet. An armed man approaches the vehicle and demands to know why the people outside were not told about the prisoners. The confrontation at the car makes it obvious the fake police are about to reveal their real intentions. Bingyan tells everyone to let the approaching men speak first instead of provoking a shootout beside the car. A man in a police uniform orders the women out, claiming their companions are safe inside the station. Bingyan immediately distrusts the explanation and refuses to abandon the vehicle without proof. The fake officer's patience disappears when polite intimidation fails. He orders his men to drag the women out by force because he has already decided he wants them. Another criminal tells them to smash the window and take whoever is inside. The women lock the doors, but the gang starts surrounding the car. Someone shouts that these men are not real police, confirming Bingyan's suspicion. The criminals reach through the opening and try to grab one of the women. A frightened voice calls for Bingyan as the struggle erupts beside the vehicle. The gang yanks at the doors while the people inside fight to keep them closed. One attacker manages to force his upper body into the car. Bingyan kicks and shoves him back before he can get a secure hold. The surrounding criminals curse and prepare to use their weapons. One of them suddenly notices movement coming from the street behind the group. He raises his gun and fires at the shape racing toward them. The target moves far too quickly for ordinary gunfire to stop it. The liquor crashes into the attackers and instantly turns their kidnapping attempt into a massacre. A criminal is thrown aside before he even understands what hit him. The monster tears through the nearest men while the survivors duck behind the car. Panic spreads as everyone realizes this is not a normal zombie. The liquor leaps again and forces armed men to scatter in every direction. One criminal fires wildly, making the chaos even worse. The monster's tongue lashes out and catches another victim before he can run. The fake officers finally forget about the women and focus entirely on staying alive. Their leader turns and sees the liquor moving through his men like they are nothing. The street becomes a battlefield of gunfire, screams, and bodies. Someone orders everyone to run while the creature is distracted. The survivors sprint away from the vehicle as fast as they can. The liquor lands among another cluster of criminals and continues hunting by sound. Bingyan keeps low because she remembers that evolved zombies can react to even small noises. One attacker tries to use the car as cover, only for the liquor to climb over it effortlessly. The gang leader fires at point-blank range and still fails to stop the creature. The liquor knocks him down and prepares to finish the job. Tianlei finally arrives and intercepts the monster before it can attack the fleeing survivors. His sudden strike pulls the liquor's attention away from everyone else. The creature charges, but Tianlei is ready for the speed after surviving their earlier exchange. He dodges the tongue and counters the moment the monster overextends. A clean blow damages the liquor's head and leaves it briefly disoriented. Tianlei does not let the opening disappear and presses the attack. The evolved zombie shrieks and launches one final desperate rush. Tianlei commits everything to the counter and destroys the creature's vulnerable core. The system congratulates him for obtaining another secondary crystal nucleus from an evolved zombie. Tianlei refuses to waste such a rare core without understanding what the new exchange options can do. Bingyan calls his name from beside the car once she realizes the monster is finally dead. Tianlei turns toward the survivors, relieved that he reached them before the criminals could do worse. Bingyan steadies herself beside Tianlei, shaken by the liquor but otherwise unharmed. She admits the sight and smell of the creature are enough to make anyone sick. Tianlei's concern turns sharp when he sees how frightened the others still are. They explain that Su Yong and several family members remain trapped inside the police station with the criminals. Tianlei immediately says worrying will not save them and orders the group to prepare for a rescue. Bingyan tries to follow, but he tells her the injured ankle makes another charge inside too dangerous. He leaves the women with protection and runs toward the station. The fake police see him approaching and begin shouting warnings from the entrance. Tianlei ignores them and keeps moving. A shot cracks through the corridor as the criminals try to stop his advance. He takes cover for only a moment before pushing deeper inside. The station has become chaotic, with doors open and prisoners scattered everywhere. Tianlei follows the noise toward the detention area. One survivor spots him and immediately calls for help. Su Yang and the others are still fighting to control the corridor as more threats appear. Tianlei joins them without wasting time on explanations. Then the worst possible problem arrives. Zombies are already entering the station. The survivors retreat toward the cells while the undead flood through the halls. People scramble for any door that can keep teeth and claws away. Someone orders the family into the detention cells because the bars can hold the zombies back. They slam the cell door while the undead crash against the metal from outside. Tianlei and the fighters work to stop the infected from reaching the trapped civilians. The surviving criminals retreat as well, abandoning anyone who cannot keep up. The family discovers that several cell doors are still locked and cannot be opened quickly. One young man fumbles with the keys while his mother yells at him to hurry. He struggles to find the correct lock as zombies close in from the corridor. His mother scolds him for panicking, but the fear in her voice is just as obvious. The younger brother clings to her while everyone waits for the door to open. A zombie reaches the bars and forces the family farther back. The mother throws herself between the creature and her children without hesitation. The lock finally gives, but the escape comes a second too late for everyone. The family rushes through the opening while the mother is caught in the struggle. One of the boys screams for her when he sees the blood. The father and older brother try to pull her away from the undead. She orders them to protect the younger child instead of wasting the chance she bought them. The family is dragged towards safety while she stays behind long enough to block the attack. Her son reaches back for her, refusing to accept what is happening. The adults force him away because another second of hesitation would kill them all. The mother's strength finally gives out after making sure her children are beyond the immediate danger. Her family watches helplessly as the distance between them becomes permanent. There is no time to grieve while zombies still fill the station. Tianlei and Su Yang clear a path so the survivors can escape the detention area. The remaining criminals scatter, each caring only about saving himself. One enemy who escapes the fighting swears Wu Xuan and the others will regret crossing him. Tianlei keeps moving instead of chasing revenge because getting the living survivors out matters more. The rescue continues with the station collapsing into complete chaos behind them. Inside the station, the surviving family members push themselves up and prepare to move before more zombies arrive. Everyone is exhausted, but staying inside the open corridor is no longer an option. One man urges the others forward while checking whether the injured can still walk. The criminal leader watches the frightened survivors with growing contempt. A young woman refuses to leave someone behind even as the danger closes in. One thug boasts that once he reaches the survivor base, he can take whatever women and status he wants. He even promises to make Tianlei and the others kneel if they ever meet again. The survivors ignore the rant and focus on getting through the next doorway. A shout warns that another group of zombies is approaching the detention block. The news instantly wipes the smugness off the criminals' faces. Everyone turns toward the corridor as the first undead appear. The survivors start retreating while armed men raise whatever weapons they still have. One family member grabs another and pulls them away from the oncoming horde. The narrow hallway becomes a bottleneck with people fighting for room to move. A criminal shoves past the civilians, caring only about reaching safety first. Someone screams at him to get out of the way instead of blocking the escape. A furious survivor calls the gang inhuman for trapping innocent people just to save themselves. The criminals answer that morality means nothing if they die here. One thug lashes out at the woman arguing with him and tries to silence her by force. The attack only creates more chaos as the zombies draw closer. The survivors fight back while the corridor erupts into a desperate struggle. A zombie lunges into the crowd and sends people crashing against the bars. Several survivors are knocked down as everyone scrambles to keep teeth away from exposed skin. Another infected forces its way through the doorway and traps the weaker civilians behind it. A terrified survivor tries to kick the zombie off while calling for help. The creature keeps clawing forward, turning every second into a fight for inches. Someone manages to strike the zombie's head and buys the trapped people a moment to breathe. More undead immediately replace it, proving the corridor will not stay clear for long. The family squeezes together and tries to hold the doorway with improvised weapons. A heavy blow knocks one zombie backward into the others. One of the brothers asks whether they are really going to die inside this station. The adults refuse to answer because nobody wants to say the fear out loud. The barricade starts failing under the combined weight of the horde. Someone admits they cannot hold the zombies back much longer. The survivors brace themselves for one final push as the doorway begins to give. A sudden attack from the side drops one of the nearest zombies. Another undead is cut down before it can recover. The trapped survivors stare toward the entrance, realizing help has finally reached them. Li Shuyong shouts that Brother Lei is here, and the panic instantly turns into hope. Tianlei checks whether everyone is still alive before moving deeper into the station. Suyang tells him the survivors are battered but still able to move. Tianlei answers that they are leaving now, before the building becomes another death trap. Suyang hands him a recovered rifle and says this weapon should make clearing the corridor easier. Tianlei checks the gun quickly and immediately puts it to use. A close-range strike knocks an attacker away from the group. Su Yang and the others fire from behind Tianlei while he controls the front line. The coordinated attack finally gives the survivors space to retreat. Tianlei catches another enemy rushing from the side and drops him with one motion. A criminal tries to flank the group but cannot get past Tianlei's speed. Tianlei shouts for everyone to move while he keeps the corridor open. An armed thug fires from the far end and nearly catches the group during the retreat. The shot misses as Tianlei forces everyone behind cover. He advances through the debris while the remaining criminals fall back. Tianlei finally reaches the man responsible for the takeover. The criminal raises his gun and welcomes him with a smile that promises the fight is not over. The corridor is littered with dead zombies after Tianlei's group finally secures a temporary opening. He orders everyone to move now while the path is still clear. One survivor thanks Brother Lei for arriving in time and introduces the police officer who helped them. Tianlei learns the officer is Ye Chenfeng and immediately recognizes how useful another trained fighter could be. Chenfeng explains that killing zombies is simple compared with dealing with armed criminals inside his own station. Tianlei tells him there will be time for introductions after everyone survives the escape. The remaining fighters gather behind them and prepare to leave together. Tianlei starts toward the exit with the civilians protected in the center. A figure steps into the doorway and stops the group cold. The criminal leader aims a gun and orders everyone not to move. Chenfeng recognizes Ma Lepeng and cannot believe the man survived the earlier chaos. Ma Lepeng grins because surviving the zombies only gave him another chance to settle old grudges. He says Tianlei's people are not leaving the police station alive today. Chenfeng raises his rifle and promises to avenge the colleagues the gang murdered. Ma Lepeng reveals a bundle of explosives, instantly changing the balance of the confrontation. The nearby survivors panic when they realize one bullet could trigger a disaster. Ma Lepeng blames the police for keeping men like him locked up and says they should have killed him when they had the chance. He threatens to send everyone in the station to the grave with him if they rush forward. Tianlei watches the bomb instead of the gun, looking for any chance to close the distance safely. Zhuyang sees his expression and understands that Brother Lei is already planning something reckless. A grieving family member suddenly charges Ma Lepeng before anyone can stop him. The attack knocks one criminal aside and breaks the frozen standoff. The survivor screams that he will not let another member of his family die here. He grabs an enemy and tries to drag him away from the explosives. Ma Lepeng strikes back, turning the hallway into another violent struggle. Tianlei measures the distance while the distraction creates the opening he needed. The criminal threatens that if one of his men dies, one of Tianlei's people will die too. Tianlei orders the others to get back and prepares to move alone. A younger survivor begs Brother Lei not to risk himself again. The family pulls the injured away while Tianlei advances. One boy admits his mother is already gone and says he cannot bear losing his brother as well. Tianlei grabs him and forces him back before grief gets him killed too. The boy struggles for another second, then finally listens. Su Yang watches Tianlei step toward the bomb carrier and realizes there is no talking him out of it. Tianlei tells everyone else to stay back while he handles the threat. Su Yang calls after him to be careful as the confrontation shifts toward the open street. Tianlei suddenly accelerates and closes most of the distance in a single burst. Ma Lepeng raises his weapon, shocked that Tianlei can move that quickly. The criminal laughs nervously and reaches for the explosive trigger. His hand closes around the detonator before anyone can stop him. For the first time, Ma Lepeng's confidence turns into fear when Tianlei appears right in front of him. He declares that his mother has finally been avenged and commits to the explosion anyway. Tianlei shouts at the nearby boy to run and throws himself toward the threat. The explosives detonate in a violent blast that tears through the street and nearby structure. The survivors scream for Brother Lei as smoke and debris swallow the area. Bingen arrives from the vehicles and asks what happened when she sees everyone staring at the ruins. The father looks for Xiaohai while trying to understand who made it out of the blast. He hears that his wife and one son are gone and nearly collapses under the news. Bingen immediately asks where Tianlei is because nobody has mentioned seeing him after the explosion. Suyang can only look toward the crater, unable to give her a reassuring answer. Bingen refuses to accept that silence as proof he is dead. She runs toward the destroyed area and searches the crater herself. The blast site is nothing but broken concrete, smoke, and scattered debris. A figure finally moves beneath the rubble and drags himself into view. Bingen recognizes Tianlei and screams his name as relief overwhelms everyone. The survivors try to stop Bingen from assuming the worst while she stares at the ruined blast site. She insists Tianlei has survived impossible situations before and must still be alive somewhere beneath the debris. Suyang calls for Brother Lei again, hoping for any answer from the crater. A faint movement finally comes from the rubble. Tianlei pushes broken concrete aside and starts climbing out of the blast zone. The group rushes forward the moment they realize the movement is really him. One survivor jokes that Tianlei must have the luck of the Monkey King to survive something like that. The family members grab him in relief and yell that he scared everyone half to death. Tianlei brushes off the reaction and says the explosion looked worse than the damage he actually took. Suyang curses him for making everyone think he had been blown apart. Bingen is too angry and relieved to decide whether she wants to hug him or hit him. She makes Tianlei promise that he will stop gambling his life so casually in the future. Tianlei accepts the lecture because he knows how close the blast really was. The rescue family thanks Tianlei's group, but he warns them that desperate humans can be more dangerous than zombies. Transportation is now limited, so not everyone can continue toward base number 6 in the same convoy. The family discusses the situation and decides they no longer want to leave the police station. Their father says base number 6 was the original goal, but losing family members changed what risks he is willing to take. Tianlei respects the choice and promises to send military help once his group reaches the base. The family thanks him for accepting the decision instead of forcing them to continue. Tianlei leaves them several light weapons and enough supplies to defend the station after the convoy departs. Ye Chenfeng announces that he will not stay behind because he still has police information that must reach the government. He says his duty is to report what happened and deliver the records to base number 6. The surviving family members tell the two boys to grow up brave instead of letting the tragedy destroy them. They remind the children that everyone still alive now carries responsibility for the people who died. The group shares one final farewell before preparing the vehicles. Tianlei checks the remaining seats and confirms who will continue with him. The family watches from the station entrance as supplies are loaded. Zuyang gives the younger survivors a last reminder to keep the doors secured. The convoy starts pulling away from the police station. One survivor calls after Tianlei and promises to show him how much stronger he becomes if they meet again. Tianlei raises a hand in farewell without slowing the vehicle. Later, the traveling group finally gets a chance to sit together and drink to the people who survived. Ye Chenfeng formally joins them and tells Tianlei to call him Chenfeng instead of Officer Yi. He explains that the alliance is temporary until he reports to the government, but he will fight beside them until then. Tianlei accepts the arrangement because another disciplined combatant makes the entire group safer. With more fighters now available, Tianlei says they cannot keep charging into battles without formation or assigned roles. Chenfeng agrees and recommends dividing responsibilities around each person's strongest skill. They begin with ranged combat, where professional training matters more than raw courage. Wu Xuan is assigned the main marksman role because his accuracy and weapon handling are already proven. Chenfeng says he can cover medium range while Tianlei remains the strongest close combat fighter. Tianlei wants the women to learn basic shooting too because anyone may eventually be isolated from the group. Bingen points out that neither woman has much experience with firearms. Chenfeng offers to introduce the weapons slowly instead of handing them something they cannot control. One novice immediately reaches for a machine gun because it looks like the most powerful option. Chenfeng shuts that idea down and explains that automatic weapons are much harder to control than movies make them look. He recommends starting with something lighter and simpler so she can learn sight alignment and recoil safely. The beginner accepts the smaller weapon and says she is willing to practice. Chenfeng tells her that mastering fundamentals will matter more than carrying the biggest gun. Li Shuyang watches the lessons and becomes increasingly unhappy about having no specialized weapon of his own. He finally complains that he is still a man and refuses to be pushed into pure logistics, while everyone else learns combat. That night, Tianlei finally gets a quiet moment and summons the system to ask about the new threats appearing outside. The system appears as casually as ever, which only annoys him more after the liquor fight. Tianlei demands real answers now that evolved zombies are showing up much earlier than he expected. He points out that a mutant appeared not long ago and a licker followed almost immediately. The system admits evolution is progressing faster than projected, but claims the overall situation remains controllable. Tianlei is not comforted because being told everything is fine means little when monsters keep trying to eat him. He accuses the system of hiding restrictions and useful information until the worst possible moment. Tianlei even threatens to quit the whole hero job if he has to keep fighting hordes empty-handed. The system reminds him that quitting is impossible, then offers something more useful, stronger equipment. That instantly gets Tianlei's attention despite how much he hates admitting the system knows him. It explains that weapon enhancement normally requires more system authority than he currently has. Because he obtained a secondary crystal nucleus, the system makes an exception and unlocks the enhancement function early. Tianlei selects his weapon and waits to see whether the upgrade is actually worth the rare core. At first the result only looks cleaner and sharper, which leaves him completely unimpressed. Then the system explains that the internal material has been strengthened far beyond ordinary steel. Tianlei tests the weapon and immediately realizes the difference is real. The system boasts that the upgraded alloy can survive forces that would destroy normal blades. Tianlei asks whether that means he finally has something capable of standing against evolved zombies. The answer is yes, at least against ordinary weapons and the tougher bodies he has been encountering. Naturally, Tianlei asks whether the system can upgrade everything else while it is already making exceptions. The system refuses and he immediately calls it stingy for stopping after one useful favor. He keeps bargaining anyway because apocalypse survival has apparently turned him into a professional system negotiator. Elsewhere, the new combat training continues with the firearms recovered from the police station. One beginner fires and completely misses the target, staring at the gun like it personally betrayed her. Chen Feng tells her the weapon is fine and the problem is the person pulling the trigger. She tries again, this time focusing on stance and sight alignment instead of raw enthusiasm. The improvement is small, but at least the shot finally lands somewhere useful. Li Suyang watches from the side and gets more frustrated with every lesson. Chen Feng promises the machine gun can be hers later, but only after she proves she can control easier weapons first. The group accepts that logic because wasting ammunition during training helps nobody. Suyang finally admits what is bothering him. Everyone seems to have a combat specialty except him. He tells Tianlei that Wu Xuan has marksmanship, Chen Feng has police training, and he feels useless beside them. Zhu Yang insists he is still willing to fight, and does not want to be pushed into logistics just because others are stronger. Tianlei lets him finish because the frustration has clearly been building for a while. He reminds Xu Yang that they met before most of the current group existed, and that trust matters as much as skill. Tianlei says he already considers Zhu Yang his right-hand man, so there was never any plan to leave him behind. He reveals a special blade and shield prepared specifically for Xu Yang's role. The blade is sharper and sturdier than Zhu Yang's old weapon, while the shield gives him real defensive value. Tianlei explains that ranged fighters can thin a horde, but close combat still decides survival when zombies break through. Xu Yang's job is to protect the group's vulnerable side and keep enemies away from the shooters. Tianlei says that responsibility only goes to somebody he trusts completely. Yu Yang stares at the equipment and finally understands how highly Brother Lei actually values him. He gets emotional enough that the others immediately start teasing him for nearly crying. Xu Yang admits nobody besides his little sister has ever placed this much trust in him before. Tianlei tells him to save the tears and prove the trust was deserved. Xu Yang grips the new weapon and promises Brother Lei he will never let the team down. Xu Yang immediately falls in love with the new blade because it is lighter, sharper, and easier to control than his old one. He proudly shows it off, already imagining how jealous everyone else will be. Dong Yushin approaches while he is still admiring the weapon and asks him to listen seriously. Without warning, she tells Xu Yang that she wants them to get married. He thinks she is joking and laughs until he realizes her expression has not changed. Yuxin repeats that she is completely serious about becoming his wife. She explains that watching the police station explode made her understand how easily one of them could disappear tomorrow. In a world this unstable, she no longer wants to postpone a future they may never get the chance to have. Xu Yang says he already promised to protect her and marriage is not necessary for him to keep that promise. Yuxin immediately asks what that is supposed to mean and takes his hesitation as rejection. Xu Yang admits he feels beneath her because she was an educated white-collar professional while he is almost nothing. He refuses to take advantage of her feelings just because the apocalypse forced them together. Yuxin gets angrier the more he tries to turn insecurity into noble self-sacrifice. She tells him that if he truly does not want her, he should say it clearly instead of hiding behind status. When she starts walking away, Xu Yang panics because the outside world is far too dangerous for her to leave alone. He catches up and tries to explain that fear, not lack of feelings, is what made him hesitate. Yuxin forces him to listen before he can talk himself into another excuse. She says she is afraid of death too, but she would never marry a man she did not genuinely love, just to survive. Then she asks him one last time whether he still doubts her feelings. Soo-young finally stops arguing with the woman who has already made her choice. The realization hits him that someone he loves actually wants the same future he does. He agrees to marry her and immediately loses every bit of composure he was pretending to have. Soo-young celebrates so loudly that Yushin has to remind him not to wake the entire building. He thinks about his little sister and wishes she could see that her brother will no longer be alone. Yu Yang promises Yushin that he will protect their new family and treat her better than the world ever has. Yushin accepts the promise and tells him that actions will matter more than dramatic speeches. The couple quickly runs into a practical problem. A wedding feels wildly extravagant during an apocalypse. Then they remember that abandoned shops contain more formal clothes than anyone can possibly need now. The group raids a nearby bridal store for a dress, rings, and anything else that can make the ceremony feel real. Even Tianlei gets pulled into helping because Yu Yang refuses to let brother Lei escape wedding duty. Everyone cleans up as much as possible and turns the shelter into a makeshift ceremony space. Yusin finally walks out in the wedding dress and leaves Yu Yang completely speechless. The others gather around, genuinely happy to have something worth celebrating after so much death. Someone finds an old recorder and speaker so the ceremony can have music without internet access. Soo-young jokes that finding working wedding music may be harder than fighting another zombie. The man cries all that the man Aldens who already been her was offering hand because he has never done anything like this before. He asks Li Shu-yang and Dong Yushin whether they will stay together through wealth, poverty, health, sickness, and whatever apocalypse comes next. Soo-young answers yes without hesitation. Yushin gives the same answer while the group watches quietly. They are told to exchange the rings they managed to recover from the store. Soo-young carefully places the ring on Yushin's hand like it is the most valuable thing left in the city. Yushin returns the gesture and finally smiles without any fear or hesitation. The makeshift officiant declares them married. The survivors cheer, clap, and let themselves enjoy a few seconds that feel almost normal. For one night, the apocalypse loses to a wedding inside a ruined city. The ceremony ends with everyone congratulating Zhu Yang and Yushin as the newlyweds finally kiss. Bingyan smiles at the couple, quietly hoping they can keep this happiness despite the world outside. Tianlei jokes that wedding expenses have changed because a full box of ammunition now costs more than fancy decorations. Soo-young thanks the entire group for helping him and promises he will remember the kindness for the rest of his life. Someone points out that wasting a wedding dress and rings after one use would be ridiculous during the apocalypse. That comment gives the women an idea before Tianlei can realize he is in danger. They decide the same clothes can be reused for another couple when the time comes. Yushin immediately tells Bingyan to try the wedding dress, throwing her completely off guard. The others argue that nobody knows when they will find another bridal shop, so this may be her best chance. Bingyan tries to refuse while Tianlei looks like he would rather fight another liquor than join this conversation. Soo-young joins the teasing because married men apparently become relationship experts in under 10 minutes. He asks Tianlei what he is waiting for when everyone already treats him and Bingyan like a couple. Tianlei snaps that marriage is not something people decide for him as a joke. Soo-young counters that sooner or later the two of them are obviously going to face the question anyway. Tianlei turns to Bingyan, only to realize she has become unexpectedly quiet. The joking atmosphere collapses when she walks away from the group. Tianlei follows because her expression makes it clear this is no longer harmless teasing. He catches up in a quieter hallway and asks what suddenly changed. Bingyan turns on him with all the frustration she has been holding back. She asks whether Tianlei only stays close to her because he feels responsible for what happened between them. The question hits him harder than the teasing, because he never realized she had been thinking that way. Bingyan says she does not want pity, obligation, or protection mistaken for love. Tianlei tries to interrupt, but she refuses to let him dodge the point. She admits she believed his constant care meant his feelings had changed. Now she worries that she simply read responsibility as affection because she wanted the answer too badly. Tianlei pulls her away from the open aisle and tells her they need to finish the conversation somewhere safer. She is still furious, but she follows rather than creating a scene in front of everyone. Once alone, Tianlei asks her to stop deciding what he feels before he can speak for himself. Bingyan tells him to say it clearly then, because vague protection is no longer enough. Tianlei finally admits that responsibility is only part of why he stays beside her. Bingyan waits for the rest, refusing to accept another half answer. She says she always believed that once he stopped resisting, his actions would eventually become real affection. When she thinks he only acted from duty, that belief turns into humiliation. Bingyan thanks him for everything he has done, but says she will leave rather than remain an unwanted burden. She insists that having nothing left does not mean she has lost her dignity. Tianlei immediately asks what she means by leaving when the city outside is still full of zombies. Bingyan says surviving alone would still hurt less than staying beside someone who does not want her. Tianlei stops her and tells her she misunderstood him completely. She turns back and demands the truth without another excuse. Tianlei finally says the words he has been avoiding. He does like her. Bingyan freezes and asks him to repeat it because she is not sure she heard correctly. He awkwardly tries to explain what kind of liking he means, making the moment much harder than necessary. Bingyan refuses to let him retreat and waits until he finishes. Tianlei admits that living and fighting beside her changed his feelings little by little. He says the connection is not only about that night or his sense of responsibility anymore. Bingyan tells him she does not need a perfect answer, only an honest beginning. She promises to forget the uncertainty and start over with him from today. Bingyan believes that if they keep surviving together, his feelings can become even stronger. Tianlei agrees, finally giving their relationship a real chance instead of hiding behind excuses. The tension between them breaks and both look lighter than they did a few minutes earlier. They start returning toward the others, still slightly embarrassed by how serious the conversation became. A sudden warning interrupts the moment as movement rushes toward them from the corridor. A frightened woman suddenly rushes from the corridor and Tianlei reacts before recognizing who is attacking him. He dodges the wild swing and turns fast enough to keep Bingyan behind him. Tianlei knocks the attacker away with a controlled kick rather than risking a lethal counter. The woman crashes to the floor, shocked that the stranger stopped her so easily. Then Tianlei hears her voice clearly and realizes it sounds painfully familiar. He lowers his guard and asks who she is before the misunderstanding gets any worse. The woman recognizes people connected to their old school and nearly breaks down from relief. Everyone helps her up and gives her a moment to recover from the shock. Tianlei remembers seeing her around school and asks how she ended up in this condition. His first question is about Shen Xinyu and the classmates who are traveling with her. The name Shen Xinyu immediately gets Bingyan's attention because she knows Tianlei once had feelings for the famous girl. The rescued woman hesitates, and the silence makes everyone expect bad news. She finally says Wu Bin is dead. Tianlei demands to know what happened and whether Shen Xinyu and Ye Shitong are still alive. The woman explains that after hearing radio reports about base number 6, their group tried driving toward it. Their car failed, leaving them hungry and stranded until another group of survivors picked them up. They knew the strangers looked dangerous, but fear of zombies left them with almost no alternative. Eventually, they reached a mountain villa controlled by the wealthy Xia brothers and their armed followers. The villa sat on a route used by many survivors, so it had grown into a small settlement behind strong defenses. Anyone seeking shelter had to surrender food, weapons, or other valuables just to enter. Inside, the old rules of money had been replaced by an even harsher system where everything still had a price. The Xia brothers controlled food and lodging, which meant wealthy or powerful survivors lived far better than everyone else. Ordinary men earned supplies through labor, while vulnerable women were often pressured to trade their bodies. Shen Xinyu's appearance drew attention almost immediately, forcing Wu Bin and the others to stay close around her. Wu Bin worked constantly because the group needed food and could not afford the villa's prices. Lin Mu, on the other hand, grew tired of hard labor and started looking for an easier way to survive. He eventually gained favor with the Xie brothers and became one of their followers. The betrayal made the remaining classmates realize they could no longer trust everyone from their old group. Wu Bin kept working anyway and spent almost everything he earned helping the women survive. On one birthday, he took extra jobs because he wanted to buy meat and give them a real meal. The woman admits she had almost forgotten her own birthday by then. Her friends tease that Wu Bin remembered because he clearly cared about her more than he admitted. She dismisses the idea and says they were only close classmates who always helped each other. That conversation ends when voices outside announce that important visitors have arrived. The women immediately tense because visits from the Xia brothers rarely mean anything good. A door opens and armed men enter the room without waiting for permission. One of the girls tells them they are not welcome and orders them to leave. The men ignore the demand because they came specifically to see Shen Xinyu. Xiao Wenxiao introduces himself with polished manners while his more aggressive brother watches from behind. Wenxiao says he has admired Shen Xinyu's work for a long time and came to meet her personally. He presents himself as a fan rather than a captor, making the situation feel even more uncomfortable. Wenxiao invites Xinyu to dinner and promises food, drinks, and better living conditions. She politely refuses because she has no interest in becoming part of his private collection. The rejection offends the men surrounding the brothers even if Wenxiao keeps smiling. They insist an invitation from the villa's owner is not something an ordinary refugee should turn down. Wenxiao offers to move Xinyu and her friends into a better residence if she cooperates. Shen Xinyu thanks him but refuses again, making her boundary unmistakable. Xia Juyu immediately mocks his brother's soft approach and calls kindness a waste of time. He orders his men to grab the women instead of continuing the polite performance. The room erupts as the classmates fight back against the sudden kidnapping attempt. One woman screams that they all came from the same school and asks how Lin Mu can help these men hurt them. Lin Mu avoids her eyes, choosing safety beside the Shea brothers over loyalty to his old friends. The thugs overpower the women one by one while the brothers watch without concern. Xiaju warns that anyone who resists will only make things worse for Yi Xitong and the others. The survivor telling the story says that was the moment their lives inside the villa truly became a prison. The kidnappers drag Shen Xinyu and the other women toward the door while their friends desperately try to stop them. One woman accuses the Xia brothers of openly abducting people and asks how they are any different from bandits. A thug shoves her away and orders the women to stop touching him with their dirty hands. The orange-haired girl rushes forward again, but another guard blocks her path. Xia Juyu laughs that inside this villa his brother and he are the only law that matters. He finally notices another young woman and starts looking at her like a new piece of property. Xiao Wenxiao says he only cares about Shen Xinyu and tells his brother he can do what he wants with the others. That casual permission makes the women realize there is no protection coming from the so-called reasonable brother. Someone calls for Sister Hua as the group is separated by the armed guards. She struggles against the men holding her and refuses to go quietly. Outside, another survivor hears the commotion and starts moving toward the building. The guards at the entrance try to stop him from getting any closer. A shout from inside tells him that something is wrong before they can explain it away. Wu Bin arrives and immediately sees his friends being dragged around by the villa's men. He had spent the day earning food for them only to return to this nightmare. Wu Bin drops what he is carrying and rushes toward the building without thinking about the numbers against him. The guards demand to know who he is and order him to leave. He ignores them and forces his way inside. The men realize another outsider has entered and move to surround him. Xia Juyu curses the guards for failing to keep people out and threatens them for being useless. The frightened guards apologize and promise they will not make the same mistake again. Wu Bin reaches the room and sees the women restrained by men who clearly have no intention of letting them leave. He calls out to Yi Xitong and tells the Xia brothers to release her. Several guards immediately attack him for speaking to the owners that way. Xitong tells Wu Bin to forget her and leave before he gets himself killed. Xia Juyu mocks Wu Bin for playing hero when he has no power inside the villa. Wu Bin loses control and charges anyway because watching his friends be abused is not something he can accept. The guards beat him back, but he keeps getting up and trying again. Xia Juyu notices the desperation and realizes Wu Bin must have feelings for Xitong. He offers a cruel bargain, lick his shoes clean and maybe he will let the girl suffer less. Wu Bin refuses and calls him exactly what he is, a bastard hiding behind armed followers. That insult earns him another brutal beating from the guards. Xitong screams for them to stop, but the plea only encourages Xia Juyu. Wu Bin is knocked down again in order to crawl if he wants to keep breathing. He still refuses to submit even when the guards raise their weapons. A gunshot tears through the room and finally drops him. The women scream Wu Bin's name as blood spreads across his clothes. Xitong tries to reach him but is held back by the men around her. Wu Bin's body goes still, confirming the death the rescued woman would later describe to Tianlei. The Xia brothers treat the killing like an inconvenience rather than the murder of an innocent man. Xia Ju taunts the women and asks whether anyone else wants to challenge him. The guards tighten their grip, making it clear resistance will bring the same result. The surviving friends are separated and taken to different parts of the villa. One woman looks back at Wu Bin's body and silently swears she will remember everything that happened. The flashback ends with the rescued survivors saying the Shea brothers destroyed their group that day. She tells Tianlei that if she ever gets the chance, she wants both Xia Wenxiao and Xia Juyu to pay. Sister Hua explains that Yi Xitong disappeared after the attack and was locked away somewhere inside the Xia villa. She begs Tianlei to save Xitong and Shen Xinyu because both women are still trapped under the brothers' control. Tianlei promises he will bring them out safely instead of leaving old classmates in that place. Li Shuyang and Ye Chenfeng immediately volunteer to help clean up the Xia brothers' operation. Sister Hua thanks them because she knows the rescue is far bigger than one person can handle. Tianlei asks for every detail she remembers about the villa, its guards, entrances, and internal layout. The team also gathers the food recovered earlier because supplies will be essential for getting through the gate. Since Sister Hua could be recognized, they disguise her appearance before approaching the mountain. Bingyan realizes the target is Shen Xinyu and asks whether Tianlei is really going to rescue his former crush. Tianlei explains that this is about saving trapped survivors, not reopening some old-school romance. Bingyan says she would have been finished long ago without Tianlei, so she cannot ask him to abandon another woman in the same position. She jokes that if Shen Xinyu comes back and tries stealing him, then the two women can settle that problem face to face. Bingyan would rather defeat a living romantic rival than watch Tianlei regret someone's death forever. Privately, she still wonders what kind of woman Shen Xinyu really is. The group tests Sister Hua's disguise and confirms she looks different enough to pass a casual inspection. Tianlei seals the current shelter and checks every entrance so the people staying behind are protected. He considers leaving Suyang as extra security, but Binyan says his right-hand man belongs on a dangerous rescue mission. Suyang promises he will protect the group on the mountain while the others keep Binyan safe here. Tianlei tells Binyan again that the villa could be more dangerous than the police station because the enemy is organized and armed. She tells him to stop repeating himself because she understands the risk and is not going to create another argument. Before he leaves, Binyan reminds Tianlei that he belongs to her now and is expected to come back alive. Tianlei accepts the warning with a smile rather than pretending their relationship is still undefined. The rest of the group watches the exchange and realizes the two have become much closer since the wedding. Binyan tells him to save the women and return as quickly as possible. Tianlei, Zhu Chen Feng, and Sister Hua load food into the vehicle and begin the trip toward the mountain villa. The road grows quieter as they leave the city and approach the private resort area. Barricades and guarded checkpoints eventually confirm they have found the right place. Tianlei studies the defenses instead of rushing in because a direct attack would warn every guard inside. The first gate looks surprisingly lightly manned for a place Sister Hua described as heavily protected. She explains that the small checkpoint is meant to look welcoming while stronger forces wait deeper inside. The team dries up slowly and acts like exhausted survivors searching for shelter. Tianlei tells the guards they have spent days escaping zombies and only want somewhere safe to rest. He adds that they saw signs of people on the mountain and hoped the settlement was still accepting newcomers. The guards claim the entire surrounding region has fallen, and this northern villa is one of the only safe places left. They praise Mr. Shah as a generous leader who takes in survivors passing through the area. Then the price appears. Each newcomer must pay a large amount of food just to enter. Tianlei acts shocked at the demand and asks how ordinary survivors could possibly afford that much. The guard explains there are additional monthly fees for housing, food, protection, and living expenses. Nobody is technically forced to pay, because anyone who refuses can simply go back down into zombie territory. Tianlei pretends the choice is reasonable and says food means nothing compared with staying alive. The guard then demands the group's vehicle and weapons under the villa's security rules. Sister Hua quietly remembers people being beaten when they later try to recover cars after running out of food. Tianlei refuses to hand over the vehicle but offers extra food instead. He asks exactly how much rice the villa values more than one functioning car. The guards immediately become interested because food is far harder to replace than abandoned vehicles. Tianlei opens the supplies and shows that he actually has enough rice to make a serious bargain. The gatekeepers stare at the food and decide this unusual newcomer needs to be reported to their leader. The guards tell Tianlei to wait while they report the offer to the villa's leadership. One soldier hurries through the inner gate to find someone with authority to approve the deal. Tianlei watches the defenses quietly and keeps pretending he is only another tired refugee. A guard returns beside a well-dressed man and identifies him as the person Tianlei needs to speak with. Sister Hua recognizes him immediately and has to hide her reaction. The man is Xiao Wenxiao, the more polished of the two brothers controlling the villa. Wenxiao introduces himself as one of the villa's leaders, and Tianlei gives his name in return. The Xia brother asks where Tianlei found so much clean rice when supplies are becoming scarce everywhere. Tianlei refuses to reveal the source and only guarantees that the food is safe because his own group eats it. He repeats that the car and weapons are necessary for surviving the road and cannot be surrendered. Instead, Tianlei offers 50 kilograms of rice as the entrance payment. He makes it clear that the food is conditional on keeping his vehicle and equipment. Wenxiao studies him carefully, trying to decide whether this stranger is dangerous or simply well supplied. He launches into a speech about protecting survivors and maintaining peace inside his territory. Because Tianlei seems reasonable, Wenxiao says he is willing to make an exception to the normal rules. The inner gate finally opens for Tianlei's group. Tianlei thanks him and continues acting like the favor has earned genuine gratitude. Wenxiao says friendship with the Xia family will be valuable and promises Tianlei will not regret it. The vehicle rolls deeper into the mountain settlement with the first checkpoint behind them. Tianlei quietly memorizes guard positions while pretending to admire the scenery. The villa is far larger than an ordinary refuge with hotels, private houses, and organized roads. Armed patrols move through the area in numbers that confirm Sister Hua's warnings were accurate. Tianlei realizes sneaking in without permission would have been much harder than the outer gate suggested. The resources inside almost make the entrance fee look reasonable until he remembers how residents are exploited. Wenxiao explains that feeding so many people is difficult and claims strict payments are necessary to keep the villa functioning. He insists security is the one thing residents never have to worry about. Wenxiao boasts that some of his personal guards are former mercenaries capable of fighting multiple zombies alone. He points out the walls, barricades, and patrols designed to keep both zombies and unwanted humans outside. Tianlei praises the system politely because showing suspicion now would ruin the entire rescue plan. Wen Xiao assigns them a comfortable private villa where wealthy guests normally stay. He orders a subordinate to escort Tianlei's group there and make sure they are treated like valuable newcomers. The group follows through the compound while continuing to study possible escape routes. Sister Hua keeps her face hidden whenever anyone passes close enough to recognize her. They finally reach the assigned house without being searched again. A servant comments that their rice supply makes them important guests and tells them to request anything they need. Tianlei sends formal thanks back to Wen Xiao and keeps the friendly act going. Once the escort leaves, the group can finally speak without guards standing directly beside them. Su Yang is impressed by the luxury, but Tianlei reminds him they came here to rescue people, not move in. Still, they agree staying a short while is useful because it gives them time to learn the compound safely. Someone jokes that the group can afford the villa's living costs because their truck still contains a huge amount of rice. That careless comment reaches ears it was never meant to reach. A villa subordinate realizes Tianlei's vehicle may contain close to a ton of valuable food. He immediately starts wondering why the Shay family is treating newcomers so generously instead of simply taking it. The greedy men decide the rice is too valuable to leave in outsiders' hands for long. While Tianlei plans the rescue inside his room, another plan is already forming against him elsewhere in the villa. Li Shuyang listens closely as Xiao Wenxiao starts explaining just how much food the villa still controls. Wenxiao says their warehouse holds far more rice, and the vehicle outside carries only a fraction of it. Su Yang realizes the Xia family may be sitting on roughly 10 times the supplies Tianlei brought through the gate. Wenxiao admits he first mistook Tianlei for an ordinary survivor with money and a lucky stash. Now he sees Tianlei as a much bigger prize because someone with that much food probably has a hidden source. Xia Zhiyu immediately wants to seize everything before Tianlei gets any chance to leave. Wen Xiao tells his brother not to rush since Tianlei is already inside their territory and cannot disappear easily. His real plan is to earn Tianlei's trust, learn where the warehouse is, and then take the entire supply. Zhiyu complains that waiting only gives an outsider more time to enjoy food that should belong to them. Wen Xiao calmly says Tianlei will eventually need to restock, and that trip will expose the warehouse for them. Jiu finally understands and grins at the thought of taking everything in one clean move. Elsewhere, armed villainmen continue moving through the compound while the Xia brothers' scheme quietly takes shape. One of Tianlei's companions admits that Wen Xiao is much more calculating than his polished manners suggest. Another warns that the older Xia brother notices details quickly, so one careless move could expose the rescue. A teammate watching the compound from cover says the hospitality looks generous enough to make the whole place suspicious. The group settles into the assigned residence, knowing the spot after he told them to wait. One companion apologizes and admits they followed because sitting behind while Tianlei took every risk felt impossible. Sister Hua catches her breath and says the accident was not Su Yang's fault. Tianlei still scolds the group because sneaking through an armed compound without coordination could get somebody killed. The purple-haired companion says they were worried about him and could not keep waiting without knowing the situation. Tianlei reminds them that worry does not make bullets less dangerous, and one careless step can cost a life. Sister Hua says she refuses to hide safely while everyone else risks themselves for people she asked them to rescue. Two of the men immediately back her up and say they are staying involved too. Another admits he may not be the strongest fighter, but information and planning can still matter against the Xia family. The breast look and quietly tells them to move fast and stay hidden. Night settles over the main Xia residence as servants and guards prepare the private dinner. Tianlei arrives with only the companions who can safely appear in public, and studies the guards along the way. Xiao Wenxiao welcomes Mr. Zhao warmly and apologizes for not entertaining such an important guest sooner. Wenxiao says they should become friends, and tells Tianlei not to act reserved inside his home. Tianlei plays along while asking about the other people gathered around the Shay brothers. His companion explains that the rest of their group is tired from traveling and needed time to recover. Wenxiao introduces his younger brother Xia Zhiyu, who has been curious about the newcomer carrying so much food. Idea. Tianlei laughs that common survivors like them are more comfortable with ordinary beer than expensive wine. Several green bottles are brought over, changing the mood from formal hospitality to something much more casual. The Xia brothers exchange brief looks, both trying to understand whether Tianlei is being careless or deliberately unpredictable. Tianlei lifts his bottle with an easy smile and tells everyone to stop overthinking the night and enjoy the drink. Xia Zhiyu looks at the beer with open contempt and asks why his brother is drinking something so cheap. Wenxiao says the point is friendship, and in this world even ordinary beer can be more valuable than old luxury wine. The older brother accepts the toast without complaint and raises the bottle toward Tianlei. Tianlei watches him with a small smile, satisfied that he has shifted the dinner onto more comfortable ground. The bottles clink together as both sides continue pretending this is nothing more than a friendly meal. Jiyu drinks with a sour expression, clearly unhappy that the newcomer keeps controlling the rhythm of the conversation. One of the Shea brothers asks Tianlei what he plans to do long-term, and whether he really intends to settle here. Tianlei says an organized government survivor shelter still sounds like the safest destination if one can reach it. He keeps the answer casual, revealing enough to sound honest without exposing the group's actual plans. Jiyu dismisses official shelters and claims government promises are not automatically better than what the Xia family built. Wenxiao says Tianlei would be treated as an honored guest if he chose to remain in their mountain refuge. Tianlei replies that every refuge has advantages and problems, so he is not rushing into any permanent decision. Wenxiao starts describing the burden of maintaining so many residents and how expensive protection has become. Tianlei asks whether the speech is leading toward another entrance fee or some new contribution. The Xia brother explains that feeding people, paying guards, and keeping the villa operational consumes enormous supplies. One of Tianlei's companions quietly realizes the polite explanation is simply another attempt to squeeze more food from them. Tianlei turns the pressure around by praising the Shea family for working so hard to protect hundreds of survivors. Wenxiao smiles and asks whether Zhao Tianlei truly appreciates what that responsibility costs. Tianlei suddenly acts uncomfortable and says the alcohol hit him harder than expected, so he needs the bathroom. Wenxiao allows it and signals a soldier to guide his guest through the residence. The escort leads Tianlei down a long corridor while he quietly memorizes every doorway and intersection. Tianlei recalls Sister Hua's description of the upper floor and the room where one of the captive women may be held. The soldier points out the bathroom and tells Lord Zhao to call if he needs anything. Tianlei says he can manage alone and waits until the escort is standing far enough away. The moment the corridor clears, Tianlei's drunken expression disappears and he slips toward the nearby rooms. He moves carefully through the hall, following the details Sister Hua gave him instead of checking doors at random. A muffled argument behind one door reveals a servant ordering a woman to take medicine she clearly does not want. The servant insults the woman and warns that Master Xia will not keep tolerating her refusal forever. Tianlei opens the door quietly and finally sees the person he came here hoping to find. Shen Xinyu sits inside the room, and the sight of her confirms Sister Hua's information was accurate. Xinyu looks up in shock and calls Tianlei's name like she cannot believe he is really standing there. He asks how the Xia family has treated her and whether she has been hurt. Xinyu says something is wrong with the medicine they force on her and that taking it leaves her weak and unable to resist. She explains that the drug sometimes makes her body feel numb, turning the locked room into an even stronger prison. Tianlei tells her to stay calm because an open rescue right now would alert every guard in the compound. Xinyu warns him that another classmate, Dongxi, is in far worse condition and desperately needs help too. Tianlei says that is exactly why he cannot leave yet because he still has to find where Dongxi was taken. Xinyu explains that Xiazhu had control of Dongxi before moving her somewhere else. The details are incomplete, but Tianlei understands that the younger Xia brother is directly involved in what happened. He tells Xinyu to keep pretending to cooperate and take only what she must until he can return safely. Xinyu says she trusts him and will endure a little longer if it gives the others a real chance to escape. Tianlei leaves the room before the servant can return and heads back toward the route he came from. Halfway down the corridor, he suddenly notices someone standing where the hallway should have been empty. The figure is Sha Wenxiao, whose calm expression makes Tianlei wonder how much the man actually saw. The two men face each other in silence, each waiting to see who reveals suspicion first. Tianlei meets Xia Wenxiao in the corridor and immediately prepares an explanation for why he wandered this far. He claims he got turned around after leaving the bathroom and simply took the wrong hallway. Wenxiao studies him for a long moment, clearly deciding whether the excuse sounds believable. Instead of accusing him, the Xia brother tells him not to blame the escort for leaving an important guest alone. Tianlei casually points toward the nearby room and asks whether the woman inside is another member of the Xia family. Wenxiao says she is not feeling well and normally eats in her room, which is why she skipped the banquet. The two start walking back as Tianlei acts satisfied with the answer. Wenxiao leads him to the corridor, while Tianlei makes sure not to glance back toward Xinyu's door. Privately, Tianlei promises Shen Xinyu that he will return once he has found Dongxi and prepared a way out. Back at dinner, Xia Zhuyu starts talking loudly about the woman upstairs and nearly says more than his brother wants. Wenxiao shuts him down with a look and tells him not to speak nonsense in front of their guest. Jiyu falls quiet though his expression makes it obvious there is more to the story. Tianlei pretends he barely knows who the woman is and asks whether she is some kind of celebrity. Wenxiao admits she had some fame before the outbreak, but dismisses it as nothing especially important now. Tianlei jokes that even the apocalypse cannot stop rich men from collecting famous faces. The conversation shifts toward Juyu, and Tianlei asks whether the younger brother prefers celebrities too. Jiu laughs that famous women are overrated and says pure young students are much more interesting. Wenxiao suddenly remembers another girl and asks what happened to the one his brother had been keeping. Tianlei hears the name Dongxi and immediately focuses on every word that follows. Juyu says the woman was troublesome, fought back constantly, and became more annoying than entertaining. He casually reveals that he got rid of her by selling her somewhere else in the compound. Tianlei's anger spikes so sharply that one of his companions notices the change in his face. Wenxiao asks whether Mr. Zhao is feeling unwell after suddenly going pale. The brown-haired companion grabs Tianlei's arm and quickly invents an excuse before he can answer. He claims Brother Lei's stomach has been acting up since the meal and says they should leave before it gets worse. Tianlei plays along, clutching his stomach and apologizing for ending the evening early. His companions guide him away while he keeps his rage buried until they are safely outside the room. Wenxiao tells Juyu to stop drinking and go rest after embarrassing himself in front of a valuable guest. The younger brother staggers to his feet, already far more drunk than he realizes. Juyu still finds enough energy to mock Tianlei for having such a weak stomach. Wenxiao remains behind and asks the servants to clean the room while his smile disappears. The older Xia brother quietly reviews everything Tianlei said and did, unable to shake the feeling that something is wrong. Outside, Tianlei's brown-haired companion immediately asks whether the bathroom trip produced any useful clues. Tianlei explains that he found Shen Xinyu, but learned Dongxi was sold away by Xia Juyu. The companion sees how furious Tianlei is and volunteers to investigate where the girl was taken. Tianlei thanks him and says they need the answer before any final rescue attempt begins. Shen Xinyu sits alone, still replaying Tianlei's promise and trying not to show hope. The sound of the door opening makes her tense because she knows Tianlei should already be gone. Xiao Wenxiao enters carrying the medicine she has repeatedly refused to take. He asks why she is still resisting when he has done so much to keep her comfortable. Wenxiao offers to feed her himself, turning the polite gesture into another reminder that she has no control here. Xinyu lowers her eyes and tries to hide how frightened and disgusted she feels. The Xia brother's expression hardens as his patience finally starts to run out. He says he has waited long enough and will not keep spending resources on someone who gives him nothing in return. Wenxiao warns that when he pays a high price for something, he expects to own what he paid for. Xinyu realizes he is pushing her toward the marriage he has been demanding since she arrived. Wenxiao grabs her shoulder and says if he cannot have something, he will never allow another man to take it. Xinyu remembers Tianlei telling her to cooperate until he can return for the real rescue. She forces herself to agree to the medicine instead of provoking Wenxiao into doing something worse. Inside, she hates the choice, but survival gives Tianlei time to find Dongxi and come back. Xinyu tells Wenxiao that she has finally thought things through and is willing to marry him. His anger immediately turns into satisfaction because he believes his patience has finally broken her resistance. Wenxiao embraces her and promises a lavish wedding worthy of the woman he intends to call his wife. Xinyu lets him hold her while silently thinking of Tianlei and waiting for the promised rescue. Night falls over another section of the villa, where different groups of survivors gather around clubs and private rooms. Lin Wu moves through the area with several subordinates, enjoying the authority the Xia family has given him. He tosses small rewards and supplies to his followers, making sure everyone remembers who controls access to favors here. The men thank Boss Lin enthusiastically because even minor benefits matter when food and medicine are scarce. Lin walks away looking completely comfortable in a role built on the suffering of weaker survivors. A voice suddenly calls his name from behind and makes him stop mid-step. For a moment he tries to place the voice, clearly not expecting anyone from his old life to find him here. Tianlei steps into view and calmly says Lin Wu's name again. The rest of Tianlei's group spreads out behind him so the former classmate has nowhere easy to run. Lin's face changes the instant he recognizes Zhao Tianlei. He blurts out that Tianlei should already be dead after everything that happened outside the villa. Tianlei answers that if trash like Lin can survive, then there is no reason he should be dead. Lin tries to recover by boasting that he now works for important people inside the Xia family's territory. He warns that any attack on him will be reported directly to Mr. Xia. Li Xuyang holds up an expensive bottle from the banquet and says the Xia brothers gave it to them personally. The evidence makes Lin realize these newcomers may currently have more value to the Xia family than he does. Tianlei explains that Wenxiao is interested in his huge rice supply, making it dangerous for Lin to start a conflict. Lin instantly changes his tone and starts calling Tianlei an old classmate like the two were never enemies. Tianlei privately marvels at how quickly the man can throw away every bit of shame when his own safety is involved. He says Lin gets one chance to leave this conversation alive, and that depends entirely on the quality of his answers. The first thing Tianlei asks is simple. Where did they take Dongxi? Fear flashes across Lin's eyes before he can hide it. One of Tianlei's companions warns him that lying now will only make whatever happens next much worse. Lin swallows his pride and says he will explain what happened. He starts recounting how survivors scattered after leaving school, and how Dongxi eventually fell into his hands. Tianlei immediately calls out parts of the story that do not match what Sister Hua already told them. The purple-haired companion grabs Lin and accuses him of hiding behind excuses after betraying people who once trusted him. Tianlei brings up Shen Xinyu and the others, forcing Lin to confront names he clearly hoped would never appear again. Sister Hua steps forward and confirms enough of the past to destroy the last pieces of Lin's fake story. Lin is stunned to see her standing beside Tianlei instead of trapped under the Shay brothers' control. Sister Hua deliberately says she belongs with Zhao Tianlei now, making it clear Lin has no power over her anymore. Lin laughs and tries to turn the situation into another insult. He calls Tianlei a loser and tells Sister Hua she would have been better off choosing someone like him. Tianlei answers by hitting Lin hard enough to wipe the smile from his face. Blood runs from Lin's mouth as the old bully finally experiences how different Tianlei is now. Tianlei stands over him and says men like Lin deserve every bit of fear they once forced onto other people. He asks again where Dongxi was taken. Lin refuses to answer unless Tianlei promises to let him go. He claims the girl is somewhere Tianlei would never think to search and uses that information as his only bargaining chip. Tianlei's patience disappears as Lin mistakes the lack of an immediate killing blow for weakness. Lin even mocks the expression Tianlei used to have when he was bullied back at school. Yu Yang and the others bristle, but Tianlei refuses to let Lin drag him into an emotional argument. He says the other men working with Lin can be questioned too, so keeping one liar alive is not necessary. Tianlei reminds Lin how Wu Bin died and makes it clear that old crimes are not being forgotten. He promises Lin that whatever his brother and friends suffered will be returned many times over. Lin's confidence finally breaks when he realizes Tianlei is not bluffing. Zhu Yang suggests keeping him alive long enough to throw him into a crowd of zombies later. The purple-haired companion raises a knife and jokes that removing Lin's tongue first would at least stop the annoying speeches. Completely terrified, Lin finally blurts out that he sold Dongxi to a brothel inside the villa. Li Shuyang repeats the word brothel in disbelief, unable to process where Lin Wu says he sent Dongxi. The purple-haired companion erupts and demands to know how anyone could sell a classmate into a place like that. Sister Hua explains that the district is one of the villa's lowest areas, where women trade themselves or are trafficked for food. Tianlei realizes the apocalypse did not create cruelty so much as remove the rules that once kept the worst people restrained. The others react with disgust as they imagine what Dongxi may have endured since being taken there. Tianlei punches Lin again before the man can hide behind another excuse. Lin crumples under the blow, already regretting every arrogant word he said minutes earlier. Tianlei grabs him and says Lin had better pray Dongxi is still alive and recoverable. He warns that if she has been permanently harmed, death will be the easiest thing Lin could ask for. Tianlei assigns the rescue immediately, telling the group who will search the district and who will protect their current shelter. Xu Yang and the others accept their roles because waiting another night could make Dongxi's situation worse. The group reaches the villa's poorest entertainment district, where bright signs cannot hide the desperation underneath. A woman approaches one of the men and quietly offers companionship in exchange for food or medicine. Tianlei looks around and says places like this once felt like something from a dark movie. Now the end of society has turned that kind of exploitation into an ordinary street business. One of the companions gets distracted by the aggressive solicitation until Tianlei reminds everyone why they came. The group spots several rough-looking men who clearly control part of the district. One companion recognizes them as criminals who were dangerous even before the outbreak. He admits that watching people like this operate freely makes all the old promises about law and order feel useless. Tianlei tells him not to blame himself for a world that collapsed faster than anyone could control. He says the Shay brothers and the criminals serving them will still be dealt with one problem at a time. A disturbance nearby pulls Tianlei's attention away from the search. Several thugs are stealing bread from a desperate woman who is trying to feed her child. The woman reaches for the food, but the largest thug tells her she has no right to demand anything back. She shields the child and begs them to leave at least enough to keep the little one alive. Tianlei and his companions exchange one look before deciding they have seen enough. The heavy-set thug turns when he realizes strangers are watching him. Tianlei closes the distance and knocks him down before the man finishes his threat. The thug hits the ground hard, shocking everyone who expected the local gang to control the street. Another criminal starts yelling that he will kill whoever attacked their boss. His confidence disappears the moment he notices Tianlei's weapon and the armed men standing behind him. Tianlei asks very calmly who exactly the thug was planning to kill. One of the companions blocks the gang's escape and tells them to stay where they are. The frightened criminal immediately changes his story and claims nobody meant any real harm. Tianli warns them that stealing from starving families is the kind of mistake they should never repeat around him. The thug nods so fast that arguing suddenly seems impossible. Two gang members lift their injured boss and retreat before Tianli decides to make the lesson more permanent. The woman clutches the rescued bread and holds her child close after the danger passes. Tianli's group starts to leave because their real search still has not produced Dongxi. The mother thanks them for helping when everyone else on the street looked away. Tianli says she does not owe them anything, but asks whether she has seen a young woman matching Dongxi's description. He explains that they are searching for a classmate with long hair and a student-like appearance. The group says they heard the girl may have been forced to work somewhere in this district. The mother hesitates, then admits she has seen someone who might match that description. She says the girl looked far too young for this place and seemed to be in terrible condition. Tianli immediately asks where she saw her. The mother points deeper into the district and gives them a specific location to check. She stops them once more before they leave and says another woman nearby may know even more. Tianli listens carefully instead of rushing off with only half the information. The mother explains that the woman claimed the missing girl should still be school age, which matches Dongxi. She finally points them toward the exact building where that contact can be found. The group reaches the address just as someone is violently thrown out from inside, confirming the place is anything but safe. The man inside the house angrily says that whether his wife agrees or not, he is selling it today. Tianli and the others hear only the worst part of that sentence and instantly assume a woman is being sold. Su-young explodes at the idea and calls the man a bastard before anyone checks what the argument is actually about. One of the companions rushes in and punches the husband, convinced they have found another trafficker. A blue-gray-haired woman runs out and demands to know why strangers are beating her husband. She explains that the two of them were arguing over their own survival problem and Nobi was trying to sell a person. The embarrassed group follows the couple inside, where the misunderstanding becomes impossible to ignore. The wife checks her husband's injury while he complains that helping strangers should not include getting punched first. The woman who guided Tianli there quietly confirms this is not the missing classmate they were searching for. The wife introduces herself as someone with medical training and makes it clear she has never attended Yuzhou College. Tianli apologizes for the impulsive attack and admits the search for Dongxi has everyone wound too tight. The doctor says he's lucky the punch did not cause real damage, then gives him a sharp lecture about thinking first. One companion explains that they are searching for a classmate who may have been trafficked through this district. The husband says he is not interested in holding a grudge when everyone here is trying to survive. Another teammate asks what the argument was really about if nobody was actually being sold. The couple explains that the husband is a mechanical engineer, while his wife has the medical skills the villa badly needs. They describe arriving at the Xia refuge months earlier and becoming useful enough that the brothers noticed them. The wife was once summoned because someone close to the Xia family became seriously ill and needed medical treatment. After seeing her skills, the Xia brothers started treating her usefulness like another resource they could control. The husband admits that food shortages and the brothers' pressure have kept both of them trapped here ever since. Tianli realizes this is another example of the Xia family turning basic survival into leverage over ordinary people. The doctor recalls helping sick and injured residents even when doing so brought unwanted attention from the villa leadership. Her husband looks exhausted from trying to protect her while having almost nothing left to trade. The doctor refuses the idea of sacrificing their relationship just so one of them might get fed. He tells her there are days when neither of them has eaten enough to think clearly. She reminds him they promised never to abandon each other no matter how desperate things became. The husband asks what that promise is worth if both of them eventually starve. The doctor hugs him and says being alive without each other would not feel like surviving anyway. Tianli's group watches the argument settle into something far more loving than the violent scene they imagined outside. The husband finally breaks down after carrying the pressure alone for so long. Tianli thinks again about how the Shea brothers make decent people desperate enough to destroy themselves. The husband explains that Wen Xiao has not pushed his wife too far because she is still one of the villa's few capable doctors. One companion mutters that turning medical care into private leverage makes Xiao Wen Xiao even worse than they thought. Tianli offers the couple a large amount of food so they can stop making survival decisions from pure hunger. Both of them stare at him because the supplies are worth far more than any ordinary repair job or medical visit. The husband insists they cannot accept so much when the old machinery and parts they own are not worth that price. Tianli says the food is partly compensation for the misunderstanding and partly an investment in useful people. He adds that the Xia brothers' comfortable days are about to end, so the couple should focus on staying alive. Tianli prepares to leave after promising someone will deliver the supplies as soon as possible. The group turns toward the door, still without a confirmed location for Dongxi. The doctor suddenly stops them and says she may know another place worth checking. Tianli immediately gives her his full attention because even a weak clue is better than searching blindly. She explains that some young women are specially selected to entertain wealthy guests in a more guarded part of the villa. If Dongxi was sold for profit, that private entertainment area is a much more likely destination than the public street. The woman who guided them admits the doctor's information fits rumors she has heard from other residents. The doctor tells Tianli not to mistake her sharp temper for ingratitude and says she genuinely hopes they find their friend. Tianli thanks her and says the clue matters more than any apology over the earlier punch. That night, the group reaches the private entertainment district, where wealthy guests still party behind guarded doors. Women perform under bright lights while armed men and rich survivors drink like the apocalypse never happened. Private rooms fill with customers who can still buy comfort because the Xia family controls nearly every resource nearby. Tianli and his companions disguise themselves as staff and enter the club to search without drawing immediate attention. The brown-haired companion complains that pretending to be a servant feels ridiculous when they could simply pose as rich guests. Tianli explains that wealthy customers watch strangers closely, while workers can move through hallways almost unnoticed. Another teammate admits the plan is smarter than barging into every room with weapons drawn. The group quietly shows Dongxi's photo to employees and asks whether anyone has seen her. Tianli tells everyone to split up and report back instead of searching the same corridor together. He moves through the expensive private wing where every closed door could be hiding another victim. Inside one room, a heavyset guest drinks with a hostess while guards linger nearby. Tianli enters carrying a tray and lowers his eyes like any ordinary club worker. The drunk customer lashes out at him for entering without enough warning. Tianli absorbs the humiliation and apologizes because exposing himself now would ruin the entire search. Walking away, he realizes ordinary people here endure this kind of abuse every day just to earn food. He thinks of Dongxi and refuses to leave until he knows what happened to her. Two hostesses pass nearby and start gossiping about troublesome customers and which rooms need service. Tianli slows down just enough to listen without making it obvious. One woman mentions a young girl named Dong who was assigned to a guest in a numbered private room. The room number is enough to make Tianli abandon the slower search and head straight toward that section. A scream from behind a nearby door confirms he is finally close. Tianli rushes inside before anyone can stop him. He finds a grotesque customer looming over an injured orange-haired young woman with medical tools and restraints nearby. For 1 second, Tianli is too shocked by her condition to even speak. The woman is Dongxi, and the injuries across her body show how long she has been abused. The customer angrily asks who Tianli is and who gave him permission to interrupt. Tianli says the man seems to enjoy giving injections, so maybe he should experience a little pain himself. He crosses the room and punches the customer before the threat can continue. The man crashes through furniture and loses every bit of confidence he had while tormenting someone weaker. He is left unconscious on the floor as Tianli turns his full attention to Dongxi. Tianli supports her carefully and tells her she is safe now. Dongxi stares through the haze and weakly reacts to the familiar voice in front of her. Tianli asks whether she recognizes him and tries to keep his own panic out of his face. Instead of answering normally, Dongxi grabs at him and desperately says she is hungry. Tianli repeats his name and says he is Zhao Tianli, the classmate who came to take her home. Her fear suddenly spikes, and she lashes out as if he is another attacker. Tianli restrains her without hurting her and curses the people who pushed her mind this far. Dongxi breaks down in his arms while he promises she will never be left in this place again. He carries her out as the rest of the team converges on the corridor. Someone with medical knowledge warns the others not to crowd her because unfamiliar faces may make the panic worse. Sister Hua stares at Dongxi's condition and asks whether she has completely lost touch with reality. The doctor says severe trauma can create violent reactions even when the victim is physically awake. One of the companions explains that Dongxi attacked Tianli too and did not seem to know who he was. The doctor says they need to treat the visible injuries first while keeping her from hurting herself. Dongxi is gently restrained because she keeps trying to run from people who are actually helping her. The purple-haired companion worries that tying her down will make the trauma worse. The doctor says leaving deep wounds untreated would be even more dangerous, so the restraint has to be temporary. The group cleans and dresses the injuries while trying to keep every movement slow and predictable. Sister Hua quietly asks how anyone could have allowed a classmate to end up like this. Attention turns to the woman responsible for managing part of the club, who is now restrained for questioning. The frightened manager insists she is only an employee and begs them not to blame her for everything that happened. Tianli's companions tell her they already know enough to start asking very specific questions about Dongxi. The woman swallows hard and asks what they want from her. Tianli enters the room and says there is only one thing he wants right now, the truth. He sits in front of her and asks exactly why Dongxi became like this. Tianlei demands an explanation for what happened to the girl who was being forced to serve guests in the private room. The club manager hesitates and asks whether Dong Si is really a friend of his. That reaction tells Tianlei she knows exactly who he means, so he warns her not to waste time lying. Terrified, the woman starts blaming Lin Wu and says the girl was delivered to the club through him. She explains that Dong Si had offended people connected to the Shi brothers and was sold here as punishment. The manager admits Dong Si was repeatedly forced to serve violent customers until the abuse shattered her mentally. She tries to excuse herself by saying everyone in the lower district is starving and people do terrible things to survive. Tianlei grabs her and says poverty does not turn trafficking and torture into accidents. He warns that if she ever treats another desperate woman this way, survival will be the least of her problems. Lin Wu, the manager, and several thugs are bound and loaded into a vehicle under armed guard. The vehicle leaves the bright entertainment district and drives toward the dark woods outside the safer streets. When it finally stops, the prisoners immediately realize Tianlei did not bring them somewhere for another conversation. He orders everyone out of the vehicle and makes them stand where the road disappears into the forest. Lin Wu tries to keep his pride and warns Tianlei not to do anything foolish. Then the prisoners notice the bodies and infected movement scattered through the area. The manager recognizes the place as a dumping ground where the villa discards corpses and unwanted problems. Lin Wu's arrogance vanishes, and he starts begging Tianlei to remember that they used to be classmates. He apologizes for everything and says Tianlei can punish him any other way as long as he is not left here. Tianlei says Lin lost the right to hide behind the word classmate after what happened to Wu Bin, Dong Si, and Shen Xinyu. He tells the prisoners that every victim they exploited had begged for mercy too. Tianlei says Lin can go find Wu Bin's body and apologize directly if he really regrets what he did. Then he orders the prisoners to start running before the zombies get close enough to choose for them. The club manager offers money, property, servants, and anything else she can think of in exchange for being taken back. Tianlei ignores the bargains because none of those things can return the lives or sanity they destroyed. The prisoners bolt into the trees while Tianlei's group stays far enough back to watch. Groans rise from the darkness as nearby zombies notice fresh living targets. The fugitives scream and scatter when the infected begin moving toward them. Several zombies accelerate through the trees, closing the distance faster than the prisoners expected. Lin Wu and the others look back and realize the path behind them is already disappearing. The first zombie reaches the slowest runner and grabs him from behind. The prisoners start begging Tianlei again, shouting that they never knew Dong Si was his friend. A bite ends the argument for one of them before Tianlei answers. Another captive screams that he does not want to die and calls for help. One thug abandons the rest and sprints deeper into the woods alone. The people behind him shout for him not to leave them as the zombies close in. Everyone breaks apart, survival instinct finally destroying the same loyalty they pretended to have before. Lin Wu spots a tree and starts climbing with everything he has left. He pulls himself above the infected and clings to the trunk while the others remain trapped below. From the branches he watches someone begging for help at the base of the tree. Lin Wu pretends he is going to reach down and save the man. Instead, he kicks the desperate survivor away and tells him to die quickly somewhere else. The victim falls backward into the waiting zombies. The infected swarm him while Lin Wu stays above them and congratulates himself for being smarter. Safe for the moment, Lin starts mocking the zombies for being too stupid to climb. He even convinces himself that Tianlei failed to kill him and that revenge is still possible. A sudden gunshot tears into Lin's leg from a distance. Tianlei stands with a rifle, proving he never stopped watching the tree. Lin loses his grip and drops toward the ground while cursing Zhao Tianlei. The zombies immediately turn toward the fresh movement beneath the branches. Lin screams that Tianlei is a bastard and promises revenge he no longer has time to take. The infected close around him as his escape route disappears completely. Tianlei watches without sympathy, remembering every person Lin helped destroy. The punishment ends the same way Lin's victims were treated, with no powerful friend coming to save him. The group starts to leave the dumping ground once the screams are swallowed by the forest. One fleeing man shoves ahead and desperately orders everyone else out of his way. Zombies race through the trees behind the scattered prisoners, forcing the survivors to keep running. Lin Wu glances back in confusion when the pursuit suddenly seems to change around him. Thinking he has somehow escaped again, Lin laughs with wild relief. He boasts that even heaven wants him alive, completely unaware of the huge black mutant standing directly behind him. The forest grows quiet except for scattered infected bodies and the movement of something hidden among them. Tianlei notices the zombies behaving strangely and wonders why several of them suddenly change direction. His first thought is another licker, because evolved monsters have already appeared far earlier than expected. He raises his rifle and searches the darkness instead of assuming the danger passed with Lin Wu's death. Tianlei slips behind cover and listens for movement between the trees. A heavy sound gives away something large just beyond the dumping ground. He finally spots a dark mass surrounded by unnatural tendrils. The creature has wrapped itself around Lin Wu's body and is pulling the corpse toward its own flesh. Two red eyes glow from the monster as it absorbs what should have been a dead man. Lin's body hangs uselessly while black tissue spreads around it. The tendrils tighten and begin fusing the corpse into the mutant. Tianlei realizes this thing may not simply eat people, because the absorption looks deliberate. He summons the system and demands an explanation for the new monster. The system complains about being called at a ridiculous hour before admitting the situation is unusual. Tianlei tells it to stop joking and identify the creature before it decides to eat him too. The system says the mutant does not match the standard zombie types currently stored in its database. That answer is the opposite of useful, and Tianlei keeps his weapon trained on the shape. A weak voice suddenly comes from the mass and begs for help. Lin Wu's face moves even though Tianlei watched the man fall into the infected minutes earlier. The suspended corpse twists as if something inside the monster is learning how to use it. The creature lunges forward while Lin's voice calls Zhao Tianlei by name. Tianlei barely avoids the first rush and realizes it can imitate more than a dead person's appearance. The mutant keeps moving with frightening speed, turning the absorbed body into part of its attack. Tianlei fires several rounds while creating distance. The creature twists around the bullets with speed no ordinary zombie should have. Tianlei curses because even landing a clean shot is becoming difficult. The monster answers with another sudden charge. A long limb slashes across the road where Tianlei was standing a second earlier. He rolls clear and raises the rifle again. Several shots finally strike the creature, but none slow it for long. The system begins analyzing the new life form while Tianlei keeps it occupied. The scan identifies a mutation involving a leech-like organism infected and transformed by the zombie virus. It explains that the creature can absorb biological material and may retain useful traits from what it consumes. Tianlei asks for the weak point before the monster finishes demonstrating those abilities on him. The system admits it only has basic information and no confirmed method for killing this new variant. Tianlei drops the useless expectation of easy answers and reaches for his axe. He mutters that trouble always seems to arrive exactly when his supplies and patience are lowest. The mutant suddenly calls Zhao Tianlei's name again with a different voice. This time the sound is familiar enough to freeze him. The creature asks whether Tianlei really cannot recognize the person hidden inside it. A face within the black mass speaks about scars and memories only someone from Tianlei's old group should know. Tianlei stares as a terrible possibility forms. He remembers Wu Bin's death, the infected corpses, and the way the virus can reactivate damaged tissue. The monster's voice and mannerisms line up with a friend who should never have been able to stand again. Tianlei finally whispers the name Wu Bin in disbelief. The mutant attacks before Tianlei can process the possibility that some part of Wu Bin is still inside it. A dark tendril wraps around Tianlei and drags him toward the creature's massive body. Tianlei struggles against the grip while calling Wu Bin's name instead of treating the monster like a stranger. The system warns him to cut himself free before the mutant absorbs him like the bodies in the forest. The creature laughs with a voice taken from someone Tianlei knew and says even a best friend can become food now. Another stolen memory is used to blame Tianlei for everything Dongxi and Shen Xinyu suffered. The monster mocks the old Zhao Tianlei as a bullied weakling who always depended on other people. Each familiar insult is designed to make him hesitate while the tendrils tighten. Tianlei closes his eyes for a moment and forces himself to separate the real Wu Bin from what the virus became. He apologizes to his friend because whatever remains inside this body is clearly suffering. Tianlei says Wu Bin deserved a better ending than being trapped inside a monster that uses his memories. One of the creature's red eyes flickers as if the name reaches something deeper than instinct. The tendrils loosen for a second, creating the first sign that human consciousness may still be buried inside. A broken voice tries to form Tianlei's name. Tianlei asks whether Wu Bin can actually remember him. The mutant convulses as conflicting instincts fight for control of the body. The system warns that any surviving human cells or consciousness cannot suppress the mutation for long. Tianlei reaches toward the creature anyway, unwilling to abandon his friend without knowing. The black mass roars and lashes around the road in pain. A strained voice tells Tianlei to go while it still has enough control to say the words. Tianlei refuses to run immediately and searches for some way to save what remains. The mutant jerks forward again as the violent instincts return. A stolen face appears in the flesh and begs Tianlei not to leave it alone. The body suddenly screams that Zhao Tianlei should die together with it. Tianlei is forced into a violent exchange that tears through the roadside. Farther away, his companions wait anxiously beside the vehicle and listen to the distant impacts. Several teammates watch the forest line, unsure whether Tianlei will return or whether they should go after him. The women in the vehicle remain tense because they know another evolved monster is somewhere behind them. Tianlei finally breaks away and vows that the Shea brothers will also pay for everything that led to Wu Bin's death. The scene returns to the villa after the group escapes the immediate threat. A cry from inside the residence sends everyone rushing toward one of the rooms. Dong-si is panicking again, and several people are trying to keep her from hurting herself. The moment she sees Tianlei, her expression changes and she weakly calls his name. He moves to her side and she begs him to save her from the bad people she still believes are coming. Tianlei asks what happened while holding her firmly enough to make the room feel safe. The others explain that Dong-si woke disoriented and reacted violently when they tried to help. Tianlei snaps at them for crowding someone whose trauma already makes every unfamiliar touch feel dangerous. The room goes quiet because his anger is sharper than anyone expected. The gray-haired doctor explains that Dong-si came out on her own and that nobody intentionally frightened her. Tianlei calms enough to understand, then takes Dong-si back toward a quieter room. One of the companions tells the doctor not to take the outburst personally because Tianlei is carrying something much heavier tonight. She asks what happened outside that made him return in such a terrible state. The companion says it involved Wu Bin. The friend Tianlei has never fully forgiven himself for losing. Once the room empties, Tianlei asks the doctor directly about Dong-si's chances of recovery. The doctor says the visible injuries should improve with treatment and several days of real rest. Her biggest concern is the psychological damage, which is beyond what ordinary first aid can repair. She admits she is not a psychiatrist and cannot promise how quickly Dong-si will trust people again. Tianlei asks Dr. Wang and her husband to stay nearby while the girl's condition remains unstable. The doctor agrees and says the arrangement will also let them continue helping injured survivors around the villa. Tianlei thanks her for staying even after everything the Xia family put them through. Dong-si clings to Tianlei again and whispers that she is still scared. He tells her they are safe for now and promises the group will keep moving toward somewhere better. Inside the villa, Tianlei proposes using the zombie chaos outside to draw the Xia family's forces away from their positions. He confirms the idea, but makes it clear he is not planning to unleash an uncontrolled horde on innocent residents. The group studies the villa layout and realizes a direct assault would force them through too many armed guards at once. Dr. Wang challenges Tianlei to explain how he can guarantee ordinary people will not be caught in the distraction. She warns that one real infection inside the crowded settlement could turn a rescue into a massacre. The others agree that saving Shen Qinyu cannot come at the cost of sacrificing 100 strangers. Someone suggests moving the residents first, but quietly evacuating that many people would expose the plan immediately. Tianlei explains that he only needs controlled panic and false alarms strong enough to make the Shea brothers spread their men out. If residents start moving, and guards lose formation, Tianlei will have the opening he needs to reach Shen Qinyu. He asks Dr. Wang and the others to quietly contact residents they trust before the operation begins. Dr. Wang admits plenty of people already hate the Xia brothers after years of abuse and exploitation. She believes the rice Tianlei brought may also convince frightened residents that his group is not there to rob them. The doctor suggests using trusted families to spread instructions so civilians know where to hide when the disturbance starts. Tianlei assigns Yu Yang and Chen Feng to protect the civilians while he focuses on breaking into the Xia residence. Then he asks how long these people can keep surviving under the Shea brothers if nobody is ever willing to take a risk. Dr. Wang falls silent because she knows staying passive only guarantees the same suffering continues. Her husband agrees with Tianlei and says safety means little when the Xia family can take anything whenever they want. He would rather face one calculated danger now than spend the rest of his life living under their feet. Another survivor agrees, giving Tianlei the support he needed to move forward. Dr. Wang's husband urges her to trust the plan and help the residents take back their own shelter. After thinking it through, Dr. Wang finally agrees to cooperate. Tianlei smiles because the rescue now has people inside the villa working with him instead of against him. He takes Sun toward the garage and asks the engineer to inspect the vehicle after everything it has survived. Sun tells him to show the damage and immediately starts thinking about what can be reinforced. The garage is packed with abandoned cars, tools, and equipment left behind when the old world collapsed. Sun explains that the villa gathered everything useful it could find, which gives him plenty of parts to work with. The engineer looks around the workshop and becomes more excited with every tool he sees. He tells Tianlei to leave the vehicle with him and promises the finished result will be worth the wait. Tianlei accepts because a stronger vehicle could save the entire team once they leave the mountain. Back at the residence, sudden shouting makes everyone rush toward the kitchen. Dong-si stands frozen beside a broken bowl while the women around her try to calm the situation. She looks terrified, as if she expects one accident to turn into another punishment. Tianlei hurries over and asks whether anyone was hurt. He checks Dong-si first and scolds the others for letting her wander around while she is still emotionally unstable. The women explain that Dong-si smelled food cooking and entered the kitchen before anyone could stop her. One of the men admits they failed to keep her in the room and the hot food spilled during the confusion. Tianlei notices Dong-si hiding one hand and immediately realizes she did not escape the accident untouched. Her palm is red from the burn and she tries to act like the pain does not matter. Everyone goes quiet once they see the injury. Dongxi looks down on her hand while someone asks if she can still move her fingers. Bingyan's expression softens and the anger from the accident disappears the moment she sees Dongxi was hurt too. The purple-haired survivor apologizes for losing his temper during the confusion. Dr. Wang points out that Dongxi accepting help from people besides Tianlei is actually a small sign of progress. Someone reminds Bingyan that her own injury was also an accident, making the whole argument feel pointless now. Bingyan admits she reacted before understanding what happened and apologizes for making things worse. Tianlei cools Dongxi's hand and wraps the burn carefully, reminding everyone that even small injuries matter now. The fresh bandage covers most of her palm, giving the frightened woman something physical to focus on. Tianlei asks whether the pain is any better, and Dongxi gives him a small nod. Bingyan tells Tianlei she is sorry too, but warns she will still speak up if he ever loses his temper unfairly again. The others exchange awkward looks as the tension between Tianlei and Bingyan turns into another relationship joke. The scene shifts elsewhere in the villa, where the Xia brothers are already receiving new information. Elsewhere in the villa, a photograph and fresh report are placed on the Xia family's table. The news immediately gets Xia Zhu's attention, putting another dangerous player in motion. One of Tianlei's allies rushes in and warns that Xia Zhu is nearby, which could expose Dongxi and the others immediately. Tianlei tells everyone not to panic because he will deal with the visitor himself. He orders the women to stay hidden and not leave the room until he says the coast is clear. The residence is quickly rearranged so nothing obvious reveals how many people Tianlei is secretly sheltering. Xiao Wenxiao lounges comfortably and asks whether Tianlei has been dissatisfied with the villa's hospitality. Tianlei says the opposite, praising the place like a grateful newcomer who has never lived this well before. He jokes that before the apocalypse he could never have imagined staying in a villa this expensive. Wenxiao quietly enjoys the flattery, believing Tianlei has already become attached to the comfort he provides. Tianlei then asks why his host came personally instead of sending another servant. Wenxiao reveals that a wedding will be held in 3 days and hands Tianlei a formal invitation. The card is presented like an honor, but the timing instantly makes Tianlei suspicious. Tianlei studies the invitation without letting his expression reveal what he is thinking. He congratulates Wenxiao and casually mentions that he thought the Xia family already had marriage arrangements. Wenxiao explains that his future wife's condition delayed things before, but now the ceremony can finally happen. Tianlei immediately understands that the bride Wenxiao is talking about is Shen Xinyu. Wenxiao says a friend of the Xia family should attend and personally witness the celebration. Tianlei thanks him politely, knowing that refusing would only make his cover look suspicious. Wenxiao stands to leave after delivering the invitation. As he reaches the door, one of the Xia men glances back with a look that makes Tianlei uneasy. Another subordinate lingers outside instead of leaving with the rest. Tianlei and Suyang exchange a tense look because one careless sound from the hidden room could ruin everything. The man suddenly turns back, forcing Tianlei to meet him at the doorway. Tianlei asks whether he forgot something. The visitor says he left an item behind and steps back inside. Tianlei keeps smiling while mentally measuring the distance between the man and the hidden survivors. The Xia subordinate retrieves a hanging garment bag that had been left near the room. For a second, Tianlei worries the search will continue and reveal the women hiding nearby. The man gives him a knowing smile that makes the harmless mistake feel far more dangerous. Tianlei improvises an embarrassing excuse for the extra signs of people in the house and plays it off as normal male behavior. The visitor laughs instead of investigating but reminds Tianlei not to miss the wedding. The hidden survivors whisper that the Xia men are gone and slowly come back out. Tianlei stops them from relaxing too much because the wedding means their rescue deadline has just become much shorter. He realizes Shen Xinyu may only have 3 days before Wenxiao tries to make the arrangement permanent. Daylight settles over the villa as preparations for the ceremony begin everywhere. Inside another residence, Shen Xinyu is forced into a wedding dress while attendants adjust the fit around her. She stares at herself without any happiness, looking more like a prisoner in formal clothing than a bride. Xiao Wenxiao suddenly enters the fitting room and comments on how interesting the scene looks. Xinyu turns sharply and demands to know who allowed him to come in. Wenxiao orders the attendants out, and they obey him without hesitation. He tells Xinyu there is no reason to be embarrassed, because she will soon become his wife. She reminds him that they are not married yet and tries to keep as much distance as the room allows. Wenxiao touches her face and says he would not have waited this long if he did not truly want her. He boasts that the wedding will be grand and that many important people have already been invited. Something he says about Tianlei makes Yinyu's composure crack for the first time. She quickly claims she does not remember him well enough for Wenxiao's questions to matter. Wenxiao brings up the fact that Tianlei once stood outside her door for a long time, watching her reaction carefully. Xinyu denies that anything meaningful happened and tries to redirect the conversation toward the wedding dress. Wenxiao says the dress fits perfectly because it was prepared specifically for her. He tells Xinyu that he already knows what she is thinking, and as she wants to see Tianlei before the ceremony, Wenxiao takes her hand and reminds her how well he believes he has treated her since bringing her here. Then his expression changes completely as he grabs her and asks why she betrayed him. Xinyu insists she does not understand what Wenxiao is accusing her of. He tells her to stop pretending because the evidence has already answered every question for him. Wenxiao throws open a book and photograph that connects Xinyu directly to Zhao Tianlei. Old school material and a photo of Tianlei with classmates make the relationship impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Xinyu's face gives away the shock she was trying to hide. Wenxiao points to the old picture and says he has suspected their connection for far longer than she realized. He explains that Tianlei's arrival, Xinyu's changing behavior, and the school evidence all started lining up too perfectly. Wenxiao grabs her and accuses Xinyu of becoming distant the moment another man appeared in the villa. His polite mask finally disappears as jealousy takes over. He tightens his grip and makes it clear that he sees Tianlei as someone trying to steal property from him. Xinyu finally snaps and tells him the Shay brothers are criminals who exploit everyone around them. She says she would rather die than spend her life as Wenxiao's captive wife. Xinyu turns and tries to run before he can stop her. Wenxiao catches her before she reaches the door. He throws her down and reminds her that escaping him inside his own villa is not that simple. Standing over her, Wenxiao says Tianlei is the reason she suddenly believes she has another choice. Xinyu asks what he plans to do to Tianlei. Wenxiao says anyone who tries taking his future wife will pay for that mistake. He calls for his people and orders them to move Xinyu somewhere Tianlei cannot reach easily. Xinyu begs him not to hurt Tianlei, which only confirms Wenxiao's suspicions. The guards pull her away while Wenxiao prepares a trap for the man she was trying to protect. The wedding banquet hall is decorated as if the apocalypse outside no longer exists. Guests from around the villa arrive in clean clothes and formal outfits for the ceremony. Tianlei appears in a suit carrying a red wedding gift and congratulates Wenxiao with a convincing smile. Wenxiao welcomes brother Zhao warmly, acting as though nothing happened between him and Xinyu. Tianlei praises the size of the celebration and says the Xia family clearly spared no resources. Wenxiao dismisses it as a simple gathering even though the room is packed with influential survivors. Nearby guests praise Wenxiao as the man who kept them protected when the rest of the city collapsed. Others talk about the food, guards, and resources the Xia family controls. Jianlei listens at the banquet table while quietly studying every entrance and person who passes. Jiang leans over and asks what Brother Lei keeps searching for. Tianlei notices that neither Shazhu nor the bride is visible and asks Wenxiao about it. Wenxiao claims Shen Xinyu is still upstairs finishing her wedding preparations. Tianlei keeps his concern hidden because asking too many questions would expose what he came here to do. Wenxiao casually repeats that the bride is only taking longer with her makeup. Before Tianlei can decide his next move, an armed man rushes into the hall shouting that zombies have entered the villa. The guests erupt in panic as the warning spreads across the room. Wenxiao's relaxed expression disappears instantly. People begin running for exits before the supposed horde can reach the banquet hall. Wenxiao orders his guards to secure the area and stop the crowd from making the situation worse. He sends Xiazhu's men and additional patrols to investigate the attack. Tianlei allows himself a small smile because the distraction is working exactly as planned. Outside, alarms and terrified shouts send civilians moving toward the safer areas they were told about. A few zombies chase through the streets while the guards scramble to contain the chaos. Tianlei slips away from the banquet and races through the now lightly guarded halls. He reaches the room where Shen Xinyu is supposed to be held and calls her name. Tianlei throws the door open before anyone can stop him. A woman in bridal clothes appears to be sitting beneath a veil. He tells Xinyu there is no time to explain and reaches for her. Tianlei grabs the bride and immediately feels the body collapse unnaturally in his hands. The weight and stiffness make him realize he has been fooled by a mannequin. Before he can retreat, a metal cage drops around him and seals the room. Tianlei grips the bars, finally understanding that Wenxiao expected this exact rescue attempt. Wenxiao walks in smiling and mocks Tianlei for taking the bait so easily. He asks whether Tianlei really thought stealing another man's wife from his own wedding would be that simple. Wenxiao's expression hardens as he makes it clear that Tianlei's rescue attempt has become a personal challenge. Tianlei grips the cage and asks Wenxiao what crime he committed besides trying to support the wedding. Wenxiao sarcastically thanks him for showing so much personal concern for the woman he planned to marry. Then Wenxiao orders his men to bring Shen Xinyu into the room. Xinyu is dragged inside, calls Tianlei's name, and freezes when she sees him trapped behind the bars. Tianlei calls back to her and immediately checks whether she has been hurt. Wenxiao explains that the entire room was prepared because he expected Tianlei to come searching for Xinyu. He says Tianlei's suspicious timing, unusual amount of food, and disappearing people made him question the friendly newcomer from the start. The more Wen Xiao investigated, the more every clue kept pointing back toward Tianlei and Shen Xinyu. Tianlei admits he underestimated how carefully Wen Xiao was watching him. Wen Xiao says Tianlei actually helped him identify the people inside the villa who were willing to oppose the Xia family. Tianlei studies him from inside the cage and realizes the rescue has turned into a larger purge. Outside, the villa is already exploding into gunfire and confusion. Residents check one another for injuries while Dr. Wang's side tries to move civilians towards safer buildings. One woman says several of the Xia family's former supporters already ran the moment the shooting started. The cooperating residents are relieved that many frightened people escaped before the armed guards sealed the streets. Another burst of gunfire forces everyone to move again as someone shouts that a survivor has been hit. Xia Zhuzher's armed men treat the disturbance like a rebellion and open fire on anyone they believe is helping Tianlei. The soldiers shoot toward cover and demand that Tianlei's companions come out and surrender. Su Yang and the others crouch behind protection, wondering how the Xia family learned enough to counter their plan. The guards threaten to burn them out if they refuse to show themselves. Bullets tear through the area while Tianlei's allies struggle to find safe angles to return fire. They finally shoot back, turning the villa streets into a full battle. Back inside, Tianlei realizes his friends are now trapped in danger while he remains locked in a cage. Xinyu begs Wen Xiao to leave the others out of this and promises she will cooperate if he lets Tianlei's people go. Wen Xiao rejects the bargain because he wanted her obedience to come from affection, not fear for another man. He draws a gun and makes it clear that Tianlei may be the price of what he calls her betrayal. Tianlei watches the weapon carefully, searching for any chance to move. Wen Xiao's finger settles near the trigger as the room falls silent. Xinyu screams for him to stop. A gunshot suddenly cracks through the room, and Wen Xiao jerks as blood appears near his shoulder. He staggers away from Tianlei, shocked that the attack came from outside his own control. Xinyu stares at the wounded man, unable to understand who fired. Tianlei smiles because the shot proves his own backup plan is still alive. Another round strikes the cage mechanism and the metal structure begins failing around him. Outside the window, Wu Xuan keeps his rifle trained on the room from a distant firing position. Tianlei uses the damaged cage to force the bars apart before Wen Xiao's guards can recover. He reaches Xinyu and tells her they are leaving immediately. Tianlei pulls her with him and races past the wounded Wen Xiao. When the corridor becomes blocked, Tianlei uses the fastest escape route available and crashes through the opening ahead. He keeps Xinyu tight against him so she is protected during the dangerous escape. Wen Xiao screams for his men to fight instead of standing there shocked. He orders every available soldier to chase Tianlei and bring Xinyu back. Tianlei runs through the villa grounds while gunfire follows behind him. His companions race toward their waiting vehicle and shout for everyone to move faster. The getaway vehicle smashes through the pursuit route and creates just enough distance to keep the group moving. Wen Xiao orders his men to kill Tianlei before he can leave the mountain. Wu Xian answers with another sniper shot that drops one of the pursuing guards. A soldier warns Wen Xiao to take cover because a sniper is still watching the entire area. Wen Xiao looks furious as the rescue slips farther beyond his reach. Another guard is hit while trying to shield his injured leader from the distant gunfire. Tianlei's vehicle speeds away from the villa under the cover of darkness. Wen Xiao watches it disappear and promises Zhao Tianlei will not escape him forever. A wounded guard lies at his feet, showing how much the failed trap has already cost. Wen Xiao turns back toward the surviving men and begins preparing his revenge. The villa's soldiers open fire across the courtyard as Tianlei's people try to break through the final defensive line. Wen Xiao realizes the attackers are far more organized than expected and starts demanding a way to stop them. The women duck behind cover while bullets tear through the space around them. One teammate fires back and warns that their ammunition is dropping fast. Xu Yang tells everyone to trust Brother Lei and hold the position until Tianlei returns. Then the reinforced vehicle slams straight into the barricade protecting the villa road. Wen Xiao and his remaining soldiers turn toward the sudden engine roar. One of Tianlei's allies spots the vehicle and shouts that Brother Lei made it back. The truck smashes through the obstacle and sends defenders scrambling away from its path. Wen Xiao can barely believe Tianlei escaped the trap and reached his people this quickly. Xia Yu rushes toward his wounded brother and panics over the blood on Wen Xiao's shoulder. Tianlei steps into view beside the vehicle, proving the rescue failed to kill or capture him. His companions immediately crowd around and call out to him in relief. Bingyan reaches Tianlei first and asks whether he is injured anywhere. The fear finally leaves her face as she leans into him and confirms he's really safe. Shen Xinyu watches the closeness between them and quietly realizes their relationship has changed. For one awkward moment, Bingyan and Xinyu meet each other's eyes and understand exactly what the other is thinking. Tianlei turns away from the relationship tension and addresses the armed men still defending the Xia family. He asks why they are risking their lives for two brothers who only value money, status, and control. Tianli promises that the food he brought can feed far more people than Wenxiao ever intended to share it with. Several soldiers look surprised when they hear how much rice is actually available. Wenxiao immediately becomes angry because Tianli is attacking the one thing holding many of his men in place. Xia Jiyu argues that none of it matters because once Tianli dies, all his supplies will belong to the Xia family anyway. Tianli asks the soldiers a simple question. How much of that rice do they really expect the brothers to give them afterward? One guard's expression changes because he already knows the answer will be almost nothing. Tianli says survival matters more than loyalty to men who keep everyone hungry enough to remain obedient. He reminds them that the Shay brothers buy subordinates with supplies, but throw those same people away whenever a dangerous job appears. Wenxiao boasts that hundreds of people recognize the Xia family as the reason this villa still exists. Tianli answers that Wenxiao mistakes dependence for loyalty and assumes hungry men can never turn against the hand controlling their food. He asks whether wearing a guard uniform really makes anyone safe when the Shay brothers are always somewhere behind the firing line. Wenxiao claims the guards who died were unfortunate casualties of fighting zombies, nothing more. Bingyan calls that a lie and says the Xia family repeatedly sent their strongest people into dangerous areas just to collect more supplies. Wenxiao turns toward her, furious that another outsider is exposing the way he operates. Bingyan reminds the soldiers how often their friends were sacrificed while the brothers stayed protected inside the villa. The guards start looking at one another as old doubts finally become impossible to ignore. Jia Ju shouts at the wavering men and demands that they remember who gave them food and shelter. Wenxiao asks whether they truly plan to believe strangers over the Xia family. One guard steps forward and says he believes what Tianli is saying. Wenxiao stares at him in disbelief because the first crack in his authority has appeared openly. Ya Jiu calls the soldiers his brothers and demands to know why they would trust people who just attacked the villa. The guard says he may not know Tianli well, but he knows exactly what he has personally seen from the Shay family. He remembers Wenxiao abandoning an injured loyal man to the zombies and later pretending the death was unavoidable. Other soldiers begin speaking about being treated like servants, taxed for everything, and used whenever the brothers needed dangerous work done. One man remembers a teammate being executed simply for speaking against the Shay brothers. The guard's fear turns into determination now that other people are finally admitting the same truth. Several armed men step away from the Xia brothers and stand together instead. Xia Ju screams at them not to betray the family that kept them alive. Tianli tells Wenxiao that nobody needs a king who rules entirely through fear and arbitrary punishment. The defecting guards interrupts the execution he was about to carry out. Tianli looks toward the shot, instantly realizing someone else made the decision for him. Blood spreads across Wenxiao as the weapon slips from his control. Tianli and the nearby survivors watch the Xia leader stagger in shock. Wenxiao tries to stay upright, but the wound is too severe. The remaining soldiers freeze because their untouchable leader suddenly looks completely mortal. Wenxiao collapses to the ground and stops moving. The guard who fired the shot stares at the body without taking it back. Xia Ju screams for his older brother and lunges toward the shooter. Other guards restrain him while he promises to kill every traitor involved. One angry survivor suggests ending Jiyu immediately so he can never hurt anyone again. Tianli stops them and says a quick death would be far too easy for everything Jui has done. The crowd agrees that the younger Xie brother should face the people whose lives he destroyed. Outside the residence, word of Wenxiao's death spreads through the villa. Xia Zhuyu is tied in front of the residents who once had to obey him. The crowd starts shouting for him to be punished. One resident says years of fear and humiliation came directly from men like him. Others describe how the Xia family made people struggle for food while keeping the best supplies for themselves. Tianli addresses everyone and says removing the Shay brothers does not mean he plans to become the villa's new owner. One former guard admits the defenders fought because protecting the settlement was once their responsibility, not because every order was right. A survivor says the people who suffered and fought back deserve something better than another ruler taking the same throne. The guards worry about what happens after Tianli leaves, because the villa still needs defense and organization. Tianli tells them the answer is simple. The residents and guards can rebuild the place together instead of serving one family. He tells Zuyang that the road ahead will be better only if people stop recreating the same system that destroyed them. Tianli announces that his own group will continue toward the government shelter the next day. Xuyang asks whether they are still leaving now that the missing friends have finally been found. Tianli says reaching Shenqinyu was only one goal, and this villa was never meant to be their final destination. He explains that their supplies, combat experience, and information can help far more people at an organized government base. The group starts discussing what work must be finished before they leave the mountain. The purple-haired survivor decides there is no point staying behind and says he will keep following Brother Lei. One of the former guards offers weapons and ammunition from the villa stores to support the journey. Tianlei thanks him, accepting only what the group can actually carry. Then Sun tells Tianlei he has one more surprise waiting in the garage. Tianlei sees the rebuilt vehicle and cannot hide how impressed he is. The truck now has reinforced armor, stronger windows, and enough protection to survive far rougher roads. The others praise Sun because the old vehicle barely looks like the same machine anymore. Tianlei asks whether the engineer wants to travel with them and keep maintaining it personally. Sun explains that the villa still needs someone who understands the generators, vehicles, and machinery, so leaving would create another problem. Dr. Wang also thanks Tianlei but says her patients here need her more than the road does. Tianlei accepts their choices because forcing useful people to leave would make him no better than the Sha brothers. Before the team departs, the doctor gives them medicine and supplies that may become impossible to find later. She says Shen Xinyu and the other injured survivors are stable but should avoid unnecessary strain. Someone asks whether Tianlei is really planning to bring Shen Xinyu with the group. Tianlei looks confused by the question and says of course she can come if that is what she wants. The scene shifts toward the women, where the trip has already become a much more personal topic. Bingyan and the others sit together while the conversation slowly turns toward Tianlei. Shen Xinyu is asked whether she plans to travel with him and admits he is one of the few people she still trusts completely. Dr. Wang warns that the road will be dangerous and says anyone who comes must understand there may be no easy return. Another woman says Tianlei saved her life, so helping him now is the least she can do. The group keeps discussing who should travel and who should remain where their skills are most useful. The purple-haired matchmaker suddenly points out that Tianlei and Shen Xinyu were never just ordinary classmates. He reminds everyone that Tianlei liked her long before the apocalypse made their lives complicated. Xinyu is stunned when someone asks whether she and Tianlei are basically engaged already. Bingyan immediately teases that Tianlei would never choose a little girl over a mature woman like her. Xinyu fires back, and the room turns into a ridiculous competition neither woman is willing to call serious. The others decide the easiest solution is to ask Tianlei directly instead of building theories behind his back. Right on cue, Tianlei appears at the doorway and asks why everyone suddenly went silent. One of the younger men admits he has never seen two women argue over the same man with this much intensity. Another survivor decides both women are terrifying in completely different ways. Tianlei jokes that he would rather face another zombie horde than stand between them for 5 more minutes. The orange-haired woman happily agrees and treats his surrender like a victory. Someone teases Dongxi about catching Tianlei in the middle of the relationship mess. Both Bingyan and Shen Xinyu call Tianlei's name at once, instantly wiping the smile off his face. Later, the armored vehicle climbs a winding mountain road toward the government shelter. The two women sit behind Tianlei in an awkward silence that nobody in the front seat wants to disturb. Tianlei changes the subject to their destination and reviews what they know about the government base. Xuyang quietly tells Brother Lei that no excuse will save him forever if both women eventually demand an answer. The driver points ahead and announces that they have finally arrived. A large mountain shelter and government-controlled complex appear in the distance. Tianlei's expression turns serious as the group prepares to handle one final problem from the villa. He opens the rear compartment of the vehicle. Xia Juyi is revealed bound and bloodied inside, still glaring at everyone around him. Tianlei drags him out while Jiyu curses him for refusing to finish things cleanly. Jiyu demands to know why he was brought all the way here instead of being killed back at the villa. Tianlei says too many dead people deserve to know that the man responsible for their suffering finally paid for it. Jiyu laughs that the old world was always ruled by the strong and claims he only survived by understanding that earlier than everyone else. Tianlei answers that the world may be unfair, but caring about other people could have kept far more survivors alive. Suyang says Jiyu became worse than the zombies because at least monsters do not pretend cruelty as leadership. The group reaches a steep cliff overlooking the forest below. Jiyu finally realizes what Tianlei intends to do and starts demanding another chance. Tianlei moves him toward the edge and tells him it is time to answer for the lives he destroyed. Xia Zhiryu falls from the cliff still bound, disappearing down the rocky slope. His body tumbles through the long drop toward the forest below. Tianlei watches from the edge until there is no movement he can see. Back in the vehicle, Yu Yang tells Brother Lei the Shay brothers finally received the repayment they earned. Tianlei thinks about Wu Bin and everyone else who suffered because of the villa's rulers. He says even 1,000 deaths could not truly erase what those men did to innocent people. Far below, Shajiyu lies injured among the trees, but slowly realizes the fall did not kill him. He starts laughing because he believes luck has saved him again. Jiyu crawls away and promises he can still take revenge if he survives long enough. Then something in the forest makes him stop moving. A massive dark limb crashes nearby and turns his relief into fear. Jiu looks around, finally understanding that the forest contains something far worse than ordinary zombies. Back on the road, the driver notices strange movement below and warns that something is wrong. Everyone looks toward the trees as a huge black shape begins rising from the forest. Tianlei stares through the window when the creature comes close enough to see clearly. Two red eyes emerge from the darkness as the mutant reveals its full size. Someone recognizes the twisted figure and says the name nobody expected to hear again, Wu Bin. The armored vehicle races down the mountain road while the black mutant tears after it through the trees. Su-young grips the wheel and asks Tianlei how close the creature has gotten. Tianlei looks back and cannot understand why the monster is following them instead of attacking easier prey. The mutant bursts from the forest and charges directly toward the vehicle. Someone asks what they are supposed to do if it keeps gaining at this speed. Tianlei tells Su-young to push the engine harder and lose the thing before it reaches the truck. The vehicle accelerates along the narrow road. The mutant leaps over obstacles and closes the distance anyway. Su-young says its speed is ridiculous and admits he cannot shake it. The creature reaches the rear of the vehicle and prepares to strike. A violent impact rocks the truck and throws everyone inside against their seats. Su-young fights the steering wheel to keep them from sliding off the mountain road. The truck swerves hard as the mutant attacks again from behind. Tianlei decides running is no longer enough and says he will kill it himself. Someone stares at the creature and suddenly recognizes something familiar in its twisted body. Su-young demands Tianlei think about everyone in the truck before doing anything reckless. Tianlei looks back at the mutant and makes his decision. He climbs onto the roof while the vehicle is still moving. Tianlei braces himself against the wind and reaches for his weapon. He opens fire into the creature with automatic bursts. Tianlei keeps shooting as the mutant charges through the bullets. The rounds tear into its body but barely slow it down. He realizes ordinary ammunition is almost useless against whatever Wu Bin has become. The mutant roars and launches itself at the truck. It catches the vehicle and begins climbing toward Tianlei. Tianlei and Su-young both realize the monster is now physically attached to the truck. The mutant swings at Tianlei on the roof. The struggle sends the vehicle swerving again. Tianlei is knocked down and nearly thrown from the moving truck. The women inside scream as the collision shakes the entire cabin. Tianlei calls for Chen Feng when the situation suddenly gets worse. Black tendrils wrap around Chen Feng and yank him toward the mutant. Chen Feng struggles while the tendrils tighten around his body. Tianlei shouts at the monster to stop attacking them. He calls out his own name and tells Wu Bin to look at him. The mutant answers with another furious roar. Chen Feng says the man they knew is gone and the mutation no longer recognizes them. Tianlei's expression changes as he accepts what that may mean. He raises the gun again and quietly apologizes to Wu Bin. Dongxi hears the name and suddenly realizes who the monster is. Memories of Wu Bin protecting Dongxi flash through the group's minds. The women stare in shock as the truth settles over the truck. The mutant pauses for one brief moment at the sound of Dongxi's voice. Tianlei fires a powerful shot that explodes against the creature's chest. The blast tears into the mutant and throws its body away from the vehicle. Dongxi screams Wu Bin's name through the smoke. For a moment everyone hopes the shot ended the fight, but the creature is still moving. The women hold Dongxi back and warn her not to get any closer. The mutant lunges toward the truck again. Tianlei realizes the wound is already recovering and curses its regeneration. Chen Feng tells him they need to shoot again before the monster reaches them. Dongxi suddenly steps into the line of fire and begs everyone not to shoot Wu Bin. Tianlei hesitates because firing now would put her directly in danger. Su-young shouts that Brother Lei has seconds to choose before the mutant kills everyone in the vehicle. The creature collapsed. Dongxi reaches the mutant and tells Wu Bin to let her stay with him one last time. The creature's red eye softens for a moment, as if something human still recognizes her. Then the two disappear beyond the edge of the road and out of the group's reach. The survivors stare after them and struggle to understand why Dongxi chose to go. Tianlei screams in frustration because another person he wanted to protect is suddenly gone. Later, the group finally reaches the government shelter and enters the building in near silence. Tianlei walks inside with everyone else, but the loss has completely drained him. His companions quietly ask whether Brother Lei has eaten anything since they arrived. Bingyan says Tianlei locked himself in a room and has refused food because he blames himself for Wu Bin and Dongxi. Shen Xinyu tells everyone not to crowd him and says he needs time to calm down on his own. The group slowly leaves the hallway, giving their leader the space he clearly wants. Inside the room, Tianlei sits alone and keeps replaying the mountain road in his head. Night falls while he remains on the floor with his head lowered. Far away, the mutated Wu Bin is still alive and carries the badly injured Dongxi through the forest. Dongxi hangs unconscious in his arms, bleeding from the fall. The creature makes broken sounds that almost form words, desperately trying to tell her not to die. Wu Bin presses part of his mutated body toward her mouth as if instinct is telling him to keep her alive somehow. He carries her deeper into the forest looking for somewhere hidden and safe. A mysterious group dressed in black discovers the pair before Wu Bin can disappear. They identify the creature as a powerful mutant and immediately notice the ordinary-looking woman protected in its arms. One member says the mutant will not survive much longer without treatment and asks what could have caused the situation. A blonde woman leading the group gives a simple order: bring the creature and the woman back with them. Night settles over the government shelter as Tianlei's companions gather inside one of the base buildings. Everyone sits around a round table filled with food, but the room is far quieter than dinner should be. One survivor takes an awkward bite and asks whether nobody else can feel how tense the situation has become. With Tianlei still absent, most of the group barely touches the food and keeps looking toward the hallway. Someone finally tells everyone to eat slowly, rest afterward, and stop turning dinner into another emergency meeting. The purple-haired woman raises a different problem and says the group needs to settle Tianlei's relationship situation before it gets worse. A few of the men immediately start joking about who should officially be called sister-in-law. She says the confusion between Bingyan, Shen Xinyu, and Brother Lei will eventually create problems if nobody speaks honestly. The conversation turns toward Shen Xinyu, whose quiet personality makes her feelings even harder for the others to read. Someone asks directly whether Tianlei still likes Xinyu the way he did before the apocalypse. Bingyan says this is not something the group should treat like a joke. Several people remind her that Tianlei's history with Xinyu was obvious long before any of them reached the villa. Bingyan says if they are so certain, they should ask the people who actually witnessed those old events. Shen Xinyu quietly asks whether Bingyan is afraid to face the possibility that Tianlei still has feelings for her. The purple-haired woman reacts instantly, turning the conversation into another round of rivalry. One frustrated survivor decides he has heard enough and leaves before the argument becomes louder. Someone jokes that leaving without even saying goodbye proves the relationship war has officially become dangerous. The women continue talking about Bingyan's confidence and how difficult she will be to outmaneuver. Bingyan says she's not given up anything, and that competition only makes her more determined. Her purple-haired ally declares that from now on everyone should understand exactly which side she is supporting. The men exchange looks and conclude that they are witnessing a war they want absolutely no part in. The matchmaker gets angry at the jokes and says the only useful answer will come from Tianlei himself. She asks Shen Xinyu whether her feelings for Tianlei are serious or only gratitude for being rescued. The purple-haired woman reminds Xinyu that Tianlei risked his life for her repeatedly, even before reaching the Xia villa. She says everyone knows Brother Lei once had a major crush on Xinyu, so pretending none of that existed helps nobody. Xinyu admits Tianlei confessed his feelings in the past, and she never gave him a proper answer. The matchmaker says that means Xinyu already knows what decision her heart is leaning toward. Xinyu remembers Tianlei protecting her from zombies and repeatedly putting himself between her and danger. The woman watches Xinyu's face and realizes the answer is becoming obvious without another confession. Xinyu says Tianlei is still grieving over Dongxi and Wu Bin, so now is not the right time to pressure him. Her friend agrees that Brother Lei's emotional state comes first, but tells Xinyu not to run from the truth forever. Xinyu nervously asks how she is supposed to speak to him when the right moment finally comes. The matchmaker immediately invents an absurd plan to create a romantic encounter whether Xinyu feels ready or not. Footsteps in the hallway reveal that Tianlei is approaching before anyone can reconsider the scheme. Someone reacts in surprise and tells everyone to get into position. The women imagine a perfect scene where Tianlei catches Xinyu in his arms like something from a romance drama. Tianlei enters still distracted and quietly notices Shen Xinyu waiting ahead. Tianlei looks at Xinyu and quietly thinks of the familiar Shen Xin he knew before everything changed. Xinyu says his name, suddenly much more nervous, now that the real moment has arrived. The matchmaker whispers for Shen Xinyu not to panic and prepares the fake stumble they planned. Tianlei opens the door fully, giving the conspirators their chance. Xinyu raises one hand and begins trying to call out to him. The stage trip goes wrong instantly, and someone falls toward Tianlei so dramatically that he jerks back in shock. Shen Xinyu turns away after the awkward setup, and Tianlei asks if she is alright when she suddenly starts leaving. She says she is fine and only wants to move somewhere quieter, so Tianlei points out the open space nearby. Tianlei watches her for a second and asks whether she actually came over because she wanted to meet him. Xinyu blushes immediately, making the answer obvious before she says anything. Her nervous posture tells Tianlei there is something important she has been trying to say. Xinyu admits she did come to see him because she has something on her mind. Tianlei stops joking and gives her his full attention. She struggles to get the words out, unsure how to comfort someone carrying this much guilt. Xinyu says she knows Wu Bin and Dongxi left Tianlei devastated, but she wants him to stop blaming himself. She explains that he may look calm on the outside, yet everyone can see how much the loss is still hurting him. Shinyu tells him the dead cannot return, so the people still alive have to keep moving instead of collapsing with them. Tianlei is surprised when she calls him the backbone of the entire group. She says everyone depends on him, which means he cannot let grief destroy the person they rely on most. Tianlei admits he promised himself he would protect people, yet some still died no matter how hard he tried. Memories of Wu Bin, Dong Si, and the other friends he failed to save hit him all over again. He says he truly believed getting stronger would be enough, but reality keeps proving there are limits to what one person can do. Shinyu reminds him that he saved her, Sister Hua, and many others who would already be dead without him. She says nobody can protect every person forever, and the others also need strength, so Tianlei is not carrying the entire world alone. Tianlei finally says he understands what she is trying to tell him. He thanks Shinyu and promises he will not surrender to despair every time the apocalypse takes someone from them. Shinyu says Wu Bin and Dong Si should become a reason to keep moving, not a chain that keeps Tianlei trapped in regret. Tianlei takes her hands and asks her to promise that she will never give up on surviving either. From a nearby doorway, Bingyan quietly watches the entire conversation without interrupting. Later, Shinyu sits alone on her bed and feels relieved that she never actually confessed the other things she wanted to say. Bingyan suddenly appears at the doorway and gets her attention with a short greeting. She walks into the room before Shinyu can decide whether the visit is friendly or confrontational. Shinyu asks if something happened. Bingyan offers her medicine for the pain and injury she picked up during the rescue. Shinyu accepts the medicine and thanks her, clearly surprised by the gesture. Bingyan mentions Shinyu's sprain and asks whether Shinyu has been paying attention to her condition too. Shinyu finally asks why Bingyan is helping someone she openly treats like a romantic rival. Bingyan jokes that medicine can make people look terrible if used wrong, briefly making the gift sound suspicious on purpose. Then she admits she does not like the idea of Tianlei choosing Shinyu, but his grief matters more than their rivalry right now. Bingyan says Wu Bin and Dong Si were important to him, so Shinyu comforting Tianlei was useful even if she hated watching it. She explains that helping Shinyu is not surrender because she is confident enough not to fear one conversation. Shinyu pauses, caught off guard by the way Bingyan describes helping her rival as simple confidence. Shinyu stares at her and repeats the word confidence, still not sure whether Bingyan is serious. Bingyan says exactly that, then teases that a little girl like Shinyu is hardly an opponent worth panicking over. She heads for the door, calls Shinyu a little girl again, and wishes her good night. After Bingyan leaves, Shinyu quietly fumes and promises she will answer that insult properly one day. Elsewhere, one of the men hears about the interaction and cannot understand how Tianlei ended up in this kind of situation. His confused reaction becomes another round of harmless teasing among the group. By morning, the table is covered with enough freshly cooked food to surprise everyone who walks into the room. The survivors look over the dishes and ask who woke up early enough to prepare all of this. Tianlei appears wearing an apron and casually tells them they are finally awake. When they ask whether he cooked everything himself, he says he got up early and wanted to do something useful. Before anyone can turn breakfast into another emotional conversation, Tianlei says he is heading outside for a while. Bingyan immediately asks where he thinks he is going alone. Tianlei explains that their stored food will not last forever, so he wants to search nearby areas and gather more. The others quietly notice that Brother Lei is finally moving again instead of sitting inside with his grief. Bingyan and Shinyu both smile because the man in front of them looks more like Tianlei again. Later, the empty city streets stretch out ahead of him as he begins searching alone. Tianlei cuts through ordinary zombies one after another while testing how quickly he can earn experience. He remembers that being stronger might have changed what happened to Wu Bin and Dong Si, giving every kill a new purpose. Tianlei races toward the next cluster of infected and decides these weak zombies will become the fuel for his next level. Tianlei cuts through ordinary zombies and watches tiny experience gains appear, complaining that his hand hurts more than the reward is worth. He remembers needing 500 points for the next rank and realizes grinding normal infected will take forever. Tianlei mutters that knowing he needs stronger prey is easier than figuring out which mutants are safe enough to hunt. Several ordinary zombies suddenly turn and start running away from something ahead. Tianlei chases after them and jokes that his experience points are not allowed to escape. Then he stops because normal zombies do not usually flee unless something much more dangerous is nearby. Gunfire and explosions echo between the buildings in the distance. Tianlei smiles and decides the real harvest he wanted may have just arrived. A military squad is fighting a large group of infected in the street. Among them, a massive mutated arm with a circular mouth and hooked claws rises over the battlefield. One soldier opens fire on the strange creature. The mutant swings its limb through the bullets and attacks the soldiers from an unexpected angle. A heavy explosion strikes the creature and briefly knocks it out of sight. Some of the squad members think they forced the monster to retreat. Their captain warns them not to relax because the creature is only hiding. Another soldier suddenly notices movement beneath the street. The mutant erupts from below and attacks the formation before they can reposition. One soldier is struck and dragged away from the group. The others scream for their captain and fallen teammates. Automatic fire fills the street as the squad tries to push the monster back. The circular maw lashes toward another soldier. The creature spins its huge body through the formation and keeps breaking their defensive line. The captain curses the mutant and promises to kill it before more people die. A red appendage whips toward the squad again. The captain raises his rifle and fires into the incoming attack. His eyes stay locked on the creature while he searches for an opening. The captain drops low and narrowly avoids another strike. He deliberately draws the monster toward himself and challenges it to come after him. The mutant lunges for the bait. A subordinate screams for the captain when the attack looks impossible to dodge. Tianlei suddenly dives into the fight and intercepts the monster. One of the soldiers is knocked aside during the rescue. A severed piece of the mutant's appendage rises on the pavement. Tianlei looks at the disgusting flesh and asks whether the captain is still able to fight. The captain notices Tianlei's clothing and asks whether he has any connection to the military. Tianlei and the soldiers exchange wary introductions while the mutant recovers nearby. They explain that their team came from a shelter in Yuzhou City, with Tongle serving under Captain Chen Fei. Tianlei reacts when he hears Chen Fei's name and starts paying closer attention. Captain Chen learns who Tianlei is and mentions the survivor staying at the Eastern Hotel before telling him to leave the mutant to the military. Chen says protecting survivors is their responsibility, so he cannot ask a civilian to fight a monster for them. Tongle refuses to abandon his captain and insists the whole squad should keep fighting. Tianlei studies the damaged creature and realizes their current attacks are not enough to end it. He reaches for an explosive and says they need something stronger than bullets. Holding the grenade, Tianlei tells them not to underestimate him just because he is not wearing a uniform. One of the younger soldiers reluctantly tells Tianlei to be careful if he insists on helping. Captain Chen orders his people to pull back instead of disobeying him and dying pointlessly. The mutant's damaged limb visibly begins regenerating while they argue. Tianlei steps forward and asks himself where the best place to start cutting this thing down will be. He stares directly at the monster and decides that from now on it is his prey. Tianlei calls up the system and asks for real information about the mutant standing in front of him. A scanning display locks onto the creature's huge clawed limb. The system identifies it as Digger, a living leech mutated by the zombie virus whose bite can cause paralysis. It classifies Digger as a level 4 mutant, with poor defense and few special abilities beyond its monstrous body. Tianlei immediately asks whether killing something this strong will finally reward him with a useful crystal core. The system gives an evasive answer, making Tianlei wonder if even it does not know everything about this mutation. Digger lunges before he can ask another question. Tianlei slashes into the incoming appendage and tries to cut it apart at close range. Captain Chen warns him not to underestimate the creature just because its defense is supposedly low. Digger suddenly sprays corrosive fluid toward Tianlei. He remembers what that acid can do and complains that the system somehow forgot to mention this very important detail. The mutant smashes another appendage down, forcing Tianlei to dodge instead of pressing the attack. Tianlei realizes ordinary strikes are not ending the fight and starts looking for a more decisive method. He spots the grenade and decides he still has one option worth trying. Digger opens its circular mouth and charges directly toward him. Tianlei throws the grenade into the opening and tells the monster to eat this instead. The explosive disappears inside the mutant before it can spit the weapon back out. A violent blast erupts from within Digger's body. Tianlei shields his face as smoke and debris fill the street. He peers through the cloud and asks whether that finally worked. The crater looks promising, but Tianlei immediately worries he may have destroyed any crystal core with the explosion. A massive limb rises through the smoke, proving Digger survived. Tianlei's eyes widen because the monster should have been torn apart. The damaged flesh begins regenerating right in front of him. Digger's circular maw swings toward Tianlei again. He realizes he relaxed too early and forgot how quickly mutated creatures can recover. Tianlei demands another answer from the system, which finally says leech-type creatures are especially vulnerable to fire and salt. That advice brings back an old childhood memory Tianlei never expected to matter during the apocalypse. He remembers his grandmother calmly telling him not to be afraid of a small leech. She explained that there was a simple way to make one release its grip. The memory shows the parasite attached to skin and drinking blood. Tianlei immediately opens the system shop and buys the one ordinary item he suddenly needs most. A bag of salt appears in his hands, and Tianlei almost laughs at how ridiculous the solution looks. He says emergencies like this are exactly why even simple supplies can become weapons. Tianlei tears the bag open and prepares to use every grain. He throws the salt directly across Digger's exposed mouth and flesh. The mutant convulses as the salt burns into its body far more effectively than bullets did. Digger recoils in obvious pain and finally stops attacking for a moment. Tianlei refuses to let it escape now that he has found the weakness. He follows with another explosive finishing strike before the creature can regenerate again. Smoke settles over the ruined street as Digger finally stops moving. Tianlei immediately starts worrying that his precious crystal core may have been destroyed along with the monster. Then Tianlei looks across the dead soldiers around Captain Chen, and the cost of the victory wipes away any excitement about rewards. Back at the shelter, the hallway is quiet while the injured survivors recover from the fight. A gray-haired woman carries over a medical box with water and medicine and asks what else the soldiers need. Tong Lei refuses the extra supplies and says they can manage. She asks whether anyone is seriously injured and offers to help, but he insists the group has things under control. Shen Xinyu says she only has abrasions and does not need much treatment. The others remind everyone that small wounds still need cleaning because infection is too dangerous now. Tong Li says Captain Chen should be treated first and tells everyone else to clean up and rest. The medical box is offered again as the group tries to be useful. Tong Lei suddenly knocks it away, sending the supplies toward the floor. Jinyu stares at him in surprise because the reaction is far too aggressive for a simple offer. The purple-haired survivor says nobody is trying to interfere and they only want to help. Tong Li repeats that they do not need assistance, making his behavior even more suspicious. Su Yang asks what he is trying so hard to hide. Someone decides the easiest answer is to look inside the room and see for themselves. Tong Li starts sweating because the secret is about to be exposed. Captain Chen's subordinate reaches for his weapon and orders everyone to stop. He blocks the doorway and warns that nobody is allowed to enter. The confrontation turns physical when one of Tianlei's companions refuses to back down. Tianlei raises his weapon and tells everyone he already warned them not to make the situation worse. Tong Lei tries to force the group away from the door. A fight breaks out in the narrow hallway. Tong Li takes a hit but refuses to move from his position. The survivors grapple with him while trying not to seriously injure a soldier who stop him reaching the room. Another survivor strikes quickly while he is restrained. Someone calls for Li Shuyang to help end the struggle. Su Yang joins the fight and finally gets enough leverage to bring Tong Lei down. The group wrestles him onto the floor before anyone fires a weapon. Tong Lei is finally pinned hard enough that the others can move past him without another weapon being drawn. Su Yang pins him and complains that even one trained soldier is ridiculously hard to control. From the doorway, Tong Li keeps shouting that they are not allowed to go inside. The room beyond him is almost completely silent. A wounded man is lying on the bed under makeshift treatment. The group immediately recognizes Captain Chen. One survivor's eye widens when the extent of the injury becomes clear. Blood has soaked through the bandaging around the captain's shoulder. Qianli and the others realize Tong Lei was not hiding weapons or supplies. He was hiding the captain's condition. Tong Lei breaks free enough to shout that nobody is allowed to touch Captain Chen. Someone asks whether the captain was bitten by a zombie during the battle. Tong Li insists there was no bite, and says infected blood only splashed into an open wound. Yu Yang asks him to repeat the explanation, because exposure that direct could still be dangerous. Tong Lei swears Captain Chen never received a bite from any infected creature. Shen Xinyu says she believes he is telling the truth. Dr. Wang explains that contaminated blood entering a wound can still create a serious infection risk. She says if Captain Chen turns, there is no known cure and everyone in the room could be endangered. Tong Lei refuses to let anyone hurt his captain and says he will fight every person there if necessary. Tianli tells him to shut up before loyalty gets more people killed. Captain Chen weakly reminds Tong Lei that they are soldiers whose job is to protect civilians, not threaten them. Tong Li looks back at his captain, barely holding himself together. Tianli says everyone understands the danger and asks Tong Li to follow the same rules the military would use for any suspected infection. Captain Chen agrees the precautions are necessary and tells Tong Li to listen instead of making things harder. Shen Xinyu calls Tianlei's name as he steps closer to the bed. Tianli says he has met too many selfish people willing to sacrifice everyone else just to keep themselves alive. He looks at Captain Chen and says someone who still thinks about other people at the edge of death deserves his respect. Tong Lei stares at Tianli and asks whether what he just said about Captain Chen is really true. Tianli explains that he has been watching infected people closely and that the virus usually produces recognizable warning signs before full transformation. Tong Li supports his captain and latches onto the explanation like it is the first hopeful thing he has heard all day. Captain Chen quietly says Tianlei is only making an informed guess, not promising that everything will be fine. Tianlei says the safest option is to isolate Chen for a while and watch his condition instead of making a decision too early. Tong Li immediately protests at the idea of keeping his captain restrained and separated from everyone. Captain Chen tells him Tianlei saved both of them and that the precautions make sense. Tong Li reluctantly suggests tying the captain down if necessary but asks to remain nearby during the isolation. Tianli tells him to trust the group because they will protect Chen while still protecting everyone else. Dr. Wang tells Tong Li to stay close enough to help with basic care while they monitor the symptoms. Tianli then says he has several questions for Tong Li about the government shelter. Tong Li looks back toward the bed and asks whether leaving Captain Chen even briefly is really necessary. The wounded captain tells him to go and answer Tianli instead of hovering beside the bed. Tong Li finally leaves the room even though every step looks reluctant. The door closes behind him and separates the hallway from the injured captain. Tong Li asks Tianli what he wants to know and tells him to make it quick. Tianli asks about the shelter, the mission that brought such a small squad outside, and how they survived the mutant attack as long as they did. He makes a dry joke about getting himself killed by asking too many military questions, earning an irritated look from Tong Li. Tong Li says the team never ran from the monster, they simply discovered that their weapons could barely hurt it. Tianli's companions brag that Brother Lei fights zombies for breakfast, so ordinary monsters are not enough to scare him anymore. Tianli ignores the exaggeration and says the least Tong Li can do is guide them toward Yushal's shelter and explain what waits there. Tong Li looks Tianli over and asks why someone who sounds so confident still looks like a kid. Tianli tells him to watch his manners and points out that they barely look different in age. Tong Li says he has already served in the army for 3 years, so Tianli should respect a little seniority. The others realize with amusement that the supposedly experienced soldier may actually be around the same age as them. Tong Li says military experience is about responsibility and discipline, not who has the oldest face. Someone jokingly apologizes before Tong Li decides to throw them out and keep them away from Captain Chen. Tong Li warns everyone that joking about him is fine, but disrespecting the captain is not. Tianli asks with exaggerated seriousness whether Tong Li really becomes this scary whenever Chen is mentioned. Then he returns to business and asks whether Yushal's shelter can actually support the huge number of survivors heading there. Tong Li explains that supply teams constantly search for food and that the base was designed to store enough resources for thousands of people. He says the mountain terrain, checkpoints, and controlled roads make the shelter far easier to defend than an open city block. Tianli asks whether the military truly believes those defenses are enough, and Tong Li says the people in charge are confident. Tianli thinks the layout looks strong against slow ordinary zombies, but much less certain against mutants. He imagines evolved creatures that can burrow, cross obstacles, or attack from directions walls were never designed to stop. Tong Li hesitates because the possibility is harder to dismiss after what happened to his squad. He says the higher-ups are already studying the new threats and tells Tianli not to worry before they even arrive. A survivor suddenly rushes into the hallway and says Captain Chen's condition is getting worse. Tong Li and Tianli immediately turn back toward the room. They hurry inside and find Captain Chen burning with fever, his face flushed while his breathing grows noticeably weaker. Everyone calls to him while Dr. Wang starts checking the change in his condition. Tianli says some of the weakness may come from the enormous amount of blood Chen lost during the fight. The doctor explains that there is no certain cure for viral exposure, so all they can do is support his body and hope he survives the infection. Tong Li stares at the captain and finally understands how serious the next few hours may be. Captain Chen weakly calls Tong Li closer. Tianli leans toward the bed as Chen tells him there is no need for formal titles and asks him to just listen. Captain Chen says he has one important request, because he may not be able to complete his mission himself. He shows Tianli information gathered during the squad's recent movements outside the shelter. Chen explains that the speed and evolution of the infected are already exceeding what the military originally expected. He warns that Yuzhou shelter cannot assume its current defenses will remain enough if stronger mutants keep appearing. Captain Chen says the people at the base need to hear what his squad discovered before another attack catches them unprepared. Tianli promises that he will deliver the warning and make sure the information reaches someone who can act on it. Chen then asks Tianli to bring Tong Li safely back to the shelter with his group. Tong Li protests immediately because he wants to stay beside his captain instead of being sent away. Captain Chen tells him he cannot keep acting like a child and reminds him that no commander can protect a subordinate forever. Tianli puts a hand on Tong Li's shoulder and promises Chen that he will get the young soldier back to the base. Tong Li eventually leaves the room with the others, still looking back toward the closed door. Someone asks how bad Chen's condition really is, and Dr. Wang says blood loss has left him dangerously weak even before the possible infection. Tong Li remains alone near the door afterward, unable to do anything except wait and hope his captain survives.